Chapter 420. Xiao Xian stayed in Gongjia Valley for another 10 days. He only left when his power of inheritance was almost fully recovered. Before he left, Xiao Xian bowed towards the valley. Although he did not know the people who left the words on the walls, perhaps they had passed away a long time ago, Xiao Xian thought about the things he copied. After plucking a leaf and leaving a message for Gongjia Heng, Xiao Xian planned to leave the valley. There was no point in staying here. Xiao Xian could feel a repulsive force. Even if he rang the bell, he would not hear an echo. Once he rang the bell, he would be silenced. This place did not welcome outsiders. Xiao Xian planned to go back the way he came when he realized the door Gongjia Heng had pushed open could not be opened. Did he force it open? He wondered if he would trigger some sort of restriction. However, while the door he came from could not be opened, Xiao Xian realized there was an opening on the other side of the valley. The door looked like it was connected to the mountain wall. It was also covered with vines and plants. If it did not open on its own, Xiao Xian would not have noticed it. The pitch-black passageway inside was very similar to the one they had taken when they came in. It didn't seem to be completely sealed off. Although there was a stale smell, it wasn't strong. Moreover, there were some other smells faintly mixed in. After some thought, Xiao Xian stepped in and left through the opening. He took out the crystals to light up the way. As Xiao Xian walked, he paid attention to the marks on the walls. Someone must have walked this way before. There were scratches on the walls. They were left there on purpose to prevent people from getting lost at the fork in the road. As he walked forward, Xiao Xian realized there were no forks in the tunnel. He could feel that the tunnel was twisting and turning. He did not know where it led to. There were some small holes in the ceiling of the tunnel. He did not know where they led to. There was no light coming from them either. However, he could feel air flowing through the holes. He continued walking. When he finally saw light again, Xiao Xian realized he was no longer in Gongjia Valley. Looking back, there was a stretch of mountain range. Looking forward, there was a large green forest. There was no sign of the Valley of Death. It was as if walking out of this passageway brought them to another world. This was not the forest Xiao Xian was familiar with, nor was it the place he and Gongjia Heng had been to before. The surrounding forest was unfamiliar. After Xiao Xian walked out of the passageway, he heard a sound behind him. The entrance to the passageway was automatically sealed. The sealed area blended in with the surroundings, and there was no sense of abruptness. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, no one would have known that there was a passageway here. Xiao Xian looked at the sun on Tian Shan Mountain and confirmed his position. Fortunately, he had not deviated too far. However, he would have to take a long detour to return to the path he had taken. After entering the forest, Xiao Xian was not worried about the lack of food. There were sounds of birds and insects around, but Xiao Xian didn't see any flying insects or birds. There were no insects jumping or crawling in the grass either. The further he walked, the more lively the sounds of birds and insects became. The trees were not very thick, their branches and leaves swaying in the wind. The sounds of birds and insects rang in Xiao Xian's ears. Xiao Xian looked carefully. His eyes, which had been searching for birds, shifted to the surrounding trees. The sounds did not come from birds, they came from the trees. As for the sounds of insects, they didn't come from insects either. They came from the grass on the ground. Especially when the wind blew, the sounds of birds and insects mixed together, rising and falling with the wind. What a strange forest! Just like the forest Xiao Xian had encountered before, there was a camouflage in this forest. It was easy to get lost in it. However, since Xiao Xian had managed to pass through the previous forest, he could pass through this one as well. After walking for nearly 2 hours, Xiao Xian realized that he hadn't left the forest, nor had he returned to the starting point. He even had a feeling that he hadn't left the starting point for too long. Xiao Xian pulled a blade of grass and tested it. The grass was flexible and as thick as the straw rope he usually used for divination. He directly used the grass to try the divination. The first time, he failed. The second time, he still failed. Almost before Xiao Xian started, the grass snapped. This wasn't a problem with the grass. Xiao Xian felt that he couldn't concentrate at all during the divination. If he couldn't concentrate all his attention on the divination, his power would be chaotic and out of order. The failure rate would naturally be very high. During the divination, the sounds of birds and insects around him seemed to be louder and noisier. It was so noisy that Xiao Xian couldn't concentrate at all. If he wanted to perform the divination, he had to block out all the sounds around him. Xiao Xian first set up an early warning trap around him. If people or other beasts approached, he would be able to sense them. After setting everything up, Xiao Xian sealed off his hearing and isolated all the sounds around him. He closed his eyes and performed the divination again. This time, the divination was much easier. Looking at the final knot he made, Xiao Xian continued to seal off his hearing and walked in one direction. He didn't look at the surrounding trees and bushes. He just walked straight in one direction without any distraction. When he walked out of the strange forest, Xiao Xian suddenly felt light all over. After removing the shield, he could hear the sounds of birds and beasts around him. It wasn't the pure sounds of birds and insects like before. Xiao Xian could hear the sounds of various beasts mixed in, as well as the rustling of leaves. There should be a small waterfall nearby. Xiao Xian heard the sound of water flowing down from a high place. Everything returned to normal. This kind of forest was normal. Although there could be all kinds of threats in the forest, all kinds of ferocious beasts, and all kinds of strange plants, it made Xiao Xian feel relaxed and comfortable. Forests should be like this. Xiao Xian washed his face beside the waterfall and hunted an unlucky mountain dolphin to fill his stomach. After a short rest, he planned to continue on his way. There weren't many ferocious beasts here, and there were even fewer beasts. Xiao Xian spent a lot of time looking for the mountain dolphin. The birds weren't very active either. Occasionally, one or two would fly by, but it wasn't like the flocks of birds that Xiao Xian usually saw. This place was much more monotonous. It was probably because this place was still relatively close to the Xia Valley that there were fewer animals. In any case, it wasn't good to stay here for long. Xiao Xian planned to leave as soon as possible. A bird with emerald green feathers flew by in the sky. There were some patterns in the shape of withered leaves around its eyes, as if it was wearing an eye patch. From the looks of it, it looked like a fat duck. The emerald green bird rested on a tree about 30 meters away from Xiao Xian. It twisted its neck and looked at Xiao Xian. Coo, coo, quack. The emerald green bird let out a strange cry. Seeing that Xiao Xian didn't move, it flew down from the tree and landed directly on the water. Then, it folded its wings and began to paddle on the water. From time to time, it would extend its neck into the water and raise its head to paddle vigorously. After that, it continued to swim around as if there was no one else around. Occasionally, it would pick up a small fish from the water and raise its head to swallow it. It had to be said that when there were so few animals around, it was indeed tempting to see such a fat duck. But Xiao Xian didn't make a move immediately. When the duck landed on the tree, Xiao Xian's sharp senses noticed that the duck's toes were like sharp hooks, firmly hooked onto the tree branch. However, the moment it landed on the water, the duck's toes suddenly opened up like a web. It looked like a swimming bird with the sharp claws of a raptor. This duck wasn't as harmless as it looked. But this fat duck swam in front of Xiao Xian as if it was saying to Xiao Xian, "Come on, eat me." Xiao Xian picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at the duck. However, the duck seemed to be prepared for this. When Xiao Xian made his move, it immediately floated on the water, spreading its wings and moving its webbed feet. It swished across the water, leaving a trail of ripples in its wake. Then it spread its wings and flew up. The webbed feet retracted, leaving only the sharp claws of an eagle. When it came out of the water, the duck didn't fly high. Instead, it flew between the trees, only occasionally rising. It looked like it was too fat to fly. Xiao Xian continued to chase. Just as he was about to catch up, the duck sped up as if it had a propeller. It quacked as it flew. The surrounding trees were very thick, so thick that 20 people couldn't wrap their arms around them. There were very few animals around, so the duck was very eye-catching. Xiao Xian chased the duck through the forest. With his speed, he could catch the duck quickly, but he wasn't in a hurry. He kept a distance and watched the duck quack in front of him. When the fat duck stopped, Xiao Xian too stopped in his tracks. He did not move forward. The duck was resting on a branch about 17 or 18 meters above the ground. It pecked at its feathers and looked at Xiao Xian. It seemed to be curious why Xiao Xian had stopped there. Quack! The duck quacked again. It even spread its wings and shook its fat body. Xiao Xian didn't look at it. He let it quack as it pleased. His gaze swept across the surrounding forest as he clenched the sword in his hand. When the duck stopped, the surroundings were very quiet. Only the rustling of the leaves could be heard. There were sounds of animals, but it was a little far from here. Just then, a black shadow rushed out of the forest. The cold light of the blade was fierce and fierce. It flashed past, and the air turned into a sharp force. It came straight for Xiao Xian. At the same time, another black shadow rushed out from the other side. He didn't have any weapons, but his arms were filled with strong and solid power. His arms were like knives. When he slashed, the air let out a roar. The two of them closed in on him. Xiao Xian instinctively sensed danger. He was prepared before the two figures rushed out. He didn't block their combined attack. Instead, he ran forward. The blade of the sword split open a crack in the ground, causing dirt and grass to fly high into the air. The sword missed, but the other person didn't seem disappointed. He continued to chase with the other person. There was a cunning look on his face. Chapter 421. Kid, give us what you found on Gongjia Mountain, roared one of the men. If you give it to us, we'll spare your life. The other man clenched his fists threateningly, showing his strength. Xiao Xian could hear the sound of his fists even as he ran. Xiao Xian ignored their words and continued to run forward. You can't run away, shouted the man behind him. He sounded a little anxious, but if you looked at his face, you would find that he was not as anxious as he sounded. Instead, he was looking at Xiao Xian's running back with a sly grin. The fat emerald duck rested on a branch, its toes scratching the tree trunk. It liked to do this when it was excited. It flew higher and rested on a higher branch, leaving the battlefield below. Its beady eyes stared downwards, craning its neck, afraid to miss anything. In the direction Xiao Xian was running, behind a thick tree, a person had stopped silently. Although he was about 5 meters above the ground, he was able to stick to the tree trunk like an insect without making a sound. At this moment, the person heard the approaching commotion. His eyes flashed with anticipation and a cruel smile. Between his fingers, he pulled out a thin bronze knife the length of a palm. The tip of the knife glinted coldly in the dark. Soon, he was very close. The person hiding behind the tree licked his lips. He seemed to have smelled fresh blood. All they had to do was wait for the target to pass by the tree and trigger the trap that had already been set. The sharpened bone spikes around the tree would shoot out like arrows, nailing the target to death. The trap only had one blind spot, and that was where he was now. Everywhere else would be covered by the bone spikes. Even if he didn't die, he would take advantage of the chaos to stab him a few more times. Thinking about it, their plan was simply perfect. He listened carefully. The target was getting closer, the target was still running, the target had jumped. Ha! Jumped? The person who was stuck to the trunk suddenly felt a sense of extreme danger. His pupils shrank to the size of a pinhole in an instant, as if he was in the middle of winter. The cold air rushed from his spine to his brain, almost making him lose his balance and fall from the trunk. His heart was thumping wildly. He wanted to stretch his head out to see what was going on, but the target's movements were too fast and too sudden. He didn't even have time to react before a sonic boom resounded through the forest. Crack! A violent tremor came from the tree trunk, and the tremor instantly spread to every branch and even every leaf. The leaves on the tree broke away from the branches like a snowstorm, scattering everywhere. None of them would have thought that the person they were targeting, the prey that was supposed to be passing by the tree and triggering the trap, would actually jump up. Not only did he jump up, but he also ruthlessly kicked the tree trunk. The thick tree trunk snapped, and the tremor from the kick was clearly transmitted to the person who was stuck to the tree trunk, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The tree trunk did not have time to digest the impact of the kick. The wood near the kick turned into pieces and flew into the air. In the air, the scattered pieces of wood turned into sawdust. The huge tree trunk fell to the ground with its dense branches and leaves, causing the ground to shake. In the forest, the birds and beasts in the distance were frightened by the sudden movement and flew away. Thud! 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 The falling tree trunk and the scattered branches and leaves triggered the trap. The sharp bone spikes hidden in the dense branches shot down from all directions. Some hit the tree trunk and some hit the bushes. The person who was sent flying with the tree trunk hurriedly dodged in the air. He used the branches to dodge many of the bone spikes, but he could not dodge all of them. He was hit in several places and fell to the ground. Blood dripped onto the grass below. Some of the sprout-like plants on the ground raised their drooping heads and opened their pod-like mouths, swallowing the dripping blood. The fat emerald duck resting on a high branch was so frightened by the scene that its feathers stood on end. It changed to another branch to rest. It wanted to leave, but after some hesitation, it decided to stay and watch the show. The smile on the face of the person chasing Xiao Xian froze. It was as if someone had smashed his face with a hammer. His expression completely collapsed. They did not have time to think, nor did they care if the person hiding behind the tree trunk was injured. They were surprised that this seemingly easy-to-deal-with young man had suddenly kicked the tree so fiercely. It was as if he had seen through their ambush. Logically speaking, they had robbed this place a few times already. If they met someone difficult to deal with, they would stay far away. If they met someone easy to deal with, they would kill them. They did not have the ability to go to Gongjia Mountain, so they could only target other people who went there. When they heard that two people were going to Gongjia Mountain, one of them being a Xia, they planned to rob them again. It was said that Xia people had a higher chance of entering Gongjia Mountain. After waiting for so long, they finally found someone. However, it was not the Xia person, it was the young man who was with him. If they had met a Xia person, they would have been more cautious. The Xia people had many secret techniques they did not know about. However, this was a young man who did not look special. They did not need to think so much. They sent out a bait to lure him here. This person must have come from Gongjia Mountain. He might have brought some treasure from there. However, they did not expect something like this to happen. They had survived and killed in the forest. They had walked the line between life and death many times. They had met all sorts of targets and had met some difficult characters. However, this was the first time they had encountered something as strange as this. This kid seemed to have seen through their plan. What was even more frightening was this person's strength. He had broken such a thick tree with one kick. There were many people who could break trees with one kick, but it was not as easy. Even if they could break trees easily, it was not as intimidating as the person who had broken the tree. They looked at the fallen tree. There was not a single leaf on it. It had all been broken by one kick. The two of them didn't have time to be surprised because they realized that the person they thought was their target suddenly turned around and rushed towards the two of them at lightning speed after that kick. One ran towards them while the other ran towards them. The distance between them shortened in the blink of an eye. Two invisible forces collided in the air. Xiao Xian held the hilt of his sword and swung it up to block the opponent's sword. The sharp collision between the swords caused that person's entire arm that was holding the sword to go numb. The web between his thumb and forefinger was shaken to the point that it split open. His feet that were firmly rooted to the ground actually became unstable under this lift, and his entire body was almost lifted up. In terms of height, they were about the same. In terms of physique, this kid did not look stronger than them. He was not even as strong as the person next to him who was swinging his fist. However, this young man who they thought was their target almost flipped him off the ground in one move. What kind of freaking strength was this? When he swung the sword away, Xiao Xian felt the wind from the fist coming towards him. He did not dodge, nor did he restrain his aura. Instead, he met the attack with a punch. The totemic power in Xiao Xian's body was galloping like 10,000 horses. After activating the bone ornaments twice, his power of inheritance had increased and his totemic power had increased. The flame-like patterns on his body seemed to burn everything. The totemic patterns on his arms extended all the way to his fists and palms. The person who swung his fist was originally confident. If this kid could break such a thick tree, so could he. Therefore, in his opinion, that kick just now was nothing. However, the moment their fists collided, he realized that he had still underestimated his opponent. Was he even human? Was he a fearsome beast? Crack, 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 crack. The person's arm was like a broken branch from the tree. The sound of it breaking could be heard. It was not enough. Xiao Xian retracted his fist and once again rushed out like a thunderbolt. His opponent wanted to retreat, but it was too late. With a muffled groan, he flew backwards. Several parts of his body split open and blood spurted out. The attack did not stop. There was only one left. The person holding the sword saw that his two companions were crippled one after another. He knew that this was a tough opponent. He did not have time to catch his breath. When Xiao Xian swung his fist, the sharp blade of his sword whistled through the air. Xiao Xian's sword flipped like a dragon and instantly moved to the left. Clang! Following the ear-piercing sound of metal clashing, the opponent used the recoil force to quickly retreat. If this attack missed, he would not have the chance to attack again. He could only retreat. Xiao Xian swung his legs. His body turned into a shadow and moved at high speed. The sword in his hand followed the movement of his arm. He threw it towards the person who was trying to escape. The sword flashed in the air. The person who was trying to escape suddenly stopped. His eyes flashed with disbelief. His vision quickly lost focus. A stream of red spring water spurted out from the back of his neck. The sword in his hand fell to the ground, shaking up some grass. Xiao Xian picked up a sturdy piece of soil from the ground and threw it in a direction. Quack! With a scream, the green figure in the air fell to the ground. Feathers slowly floated down from the sky. Xiao Xian walked over and grabbed the wings of the struggling duck on the ground. He took out a straw rope and tied it up. Then, he threw it aside. After throwing the duck, Xiao Xian walked towards the place where the tree he had kicked had fallen. There, a person was pinned under the branches. Blood was flowing out of his body. When Xiao Xian went over, the grass snake-like totemic patterns on the person's body gradually disappeared. He twitched a few times and died. Xiao Xian found it strange. Logically speaking, this person was not pinned under the tree. The bone spikes did not hit any vital parts of his body. How did he die? After kicking the tree away, Xiao Xian used his sword to flip the person on the ground over. He found that the wounds on his body were greenish-purple. Poison on the bone spikes? No. Xiao Xian looked at the bean sprouts on the ground. These were the ones that were highly poisonous. After dealing with the three people, there was no one else around. Xiao Xian walked back to the fat duck and lifted it up by the neck. Tell me, should I roast you or boil you? Chapter 422. When Xiao Xian saw this fat duck, he knew that it was not a pure wild bird. As someone who grew up watching the cha-cha and the other beasts in the tribe, Xiao Xian understood the look in the duck's eyes all too well. Especially when the bird swam around in the water right in front of him, its black bean-like eyes flashed. Xiao Xian knew what it was up to. Originally, Xiao Xian wanted to follow the duck to see who was around. But when he arrived, he already guessed that the other party was not friendly. There were traps in front. Others might not be able to tell, but Xiao Xian could. He had set traps like this before. If he kept a distance, he was confident that he could escape if he was surrounded. But when the other party appeared, Xiao Xian changed his mind. He took care of the people and traps hiding in the dark first, then used this attack to distract the others and take care of them one by one. Also, Xiao Xian wanted to know how much his totemic power had increased after activating the bone ornaments twice. Now that the robbers were taken care of, Xiao Xian had a firm grip on the fat duck that brought him here. In response to Xiao Xian's words, the fat duck's black eyes flashed. It wanted to call out, but because its neck was choked, it could only make two strange sounds. Obviously, it could understand Xiao Xian's words. Xiao Xian could feel that the duck was panicking. "I'll ask you a few questions. If I'm satisfied with your answers, I'll let you go." Xiao Xian stared at the duck in his hand and said. With its wings tied up, the fat duck kicked its feet and nodded. Xiao Xian moved his hand slightly, but he did not let his guard down. If the duck pecked at him after he let go, Xiao Xian would break its thin neck without hesitation. Luckily, the duck was smart enough not to peck. It looked at Xiao Xian and waited for Xiao Xian to speak. "Are there more of them?" Xiao Xian asked. The duck paused, then nodded. "How many?" Xiao Xian asked again. The duck froze. It did not know how to count. It only knew if there were people or not. As for how many, there was 1, there was 10. Looking at the duck, Xiao Xian knew that he would not get an answer from it. "Bring me there." The fat duck kicked its feet, indicating that it couldn't walk because it was being held. Xiao Xian used a straw rope to tie its neck and untied its wings. Then he held the long rope. "Lead the way." The duck trembled. It was not used to being tied up, but it still obediently led the way. However, its eyes kept darting around, trying to think of a way to escape. When he passed by the fallen tree, Xiao Xian noticed that the body of the person who died under the tree had become a strange greenish-black color. It was terrifying. There was a pungent smell around him, and it was coming from this person. Xiao Xian glanced at the inconspicuous poisonous grass on the ground. He planned to take a look at the grass after dealing with those people. It was no ordinary poison that could kill a totemic warrior. The duck was cooperative. It did not purposely lead Xiao Xian to dangerous places. It even led Xiao Xian to avoid places with traps. This changed Xiao Xian's impression of the duck. The duck did not seem to be on good terms with these people. When it saw the three of them being taken care of by Xiao Xian, it did not show any anger. Now, even though it was still thinking of a way to escape, it did lead Xiao Xian to the group's camp. It even led him to a safe place. It did not care that Xiao Xian was looking for trouble. In fact, it was happy to see it. After walking for a while, Xiao Xian saw many traces of human life. There were some boiled bones thrown into the grass. They looked like human bones. The duck quickened its pace, waddling as it continued to lead Xiao Xian in that direction. It could call out now to warn the people there, but it did not. Xiao Xian looked at a wooden house built on a tree not far away. There were all sorts of branches and vines around the house, hiding it in a patch of greenery. There were some bones and burnt wood ashes under the tree. Someone was moving around in the house. Xiao Xian listened carefully. There was only one person. Also, Xiao Xian could not feel much strength from the person. The person in the house was muttering. There were also sounds of hammering and chopping. After making sure there was no one else around, Xiao Xian tied the duck to a nearby tree. He did not care if it would peck the rope. Since the duck did not make any noise, it would not make any noise later. Xiao Xian quietly climbed up the tree and came to the wooden house. In the wooden house, there was an old man with a hunched back. He was as thin as a match and had a sickly appearance. He was cursing and swearing. Beside him, there was some cut meat. It was unknown what kind of animal it was. Sensing something, the old man turned around. "You're back." Who are you? Seeing the stranger, the old man was alarmed. His eyes flashed. He was measuring the difference in strength between them. He was also wondering how the three of them were doing and when they would return. But when he looked closely at Xiao Xian, the old man's eyes were filled with fear. You? Why are you here? You know me? Xiao Xian walked into the house and looked at the old man. There were some human skulls hanging around the house. There were signs of blunt or sharp weapons on the skulls. No. I don't know you. The old man quickly denied. Xiao Xian swung his sword and flicked the old man's axe away. He pointed the tip of his sword at the old man. You're the only one here. There's 3 more. After the old man's axe was flicked away, he shrank back and answered in a trembling voice. How do you know me? Xiao Xian asked again. I don't know you. Seeing the tip of Xiao Xian's sword approaching, the old man panicked even more. He screamed and fell to the ground, clutching his head. I really don't know you. I heard them say that their target this time was a young man with a sword. That's why I... Tell me where you came from. Xiao Xian pulled over a stool made of wood and sat down. The old man raised his head, trembling. He quickly glanced outside the door and glanced at Xiao Xian. Where are the 3 of them? They're dead. Hearing this, the old man trembled in fear. When he glanced at Xiao Xian, he saw Xiao Xian's impatient expression. He quickly said, If I tell you, can you spare my life? Xiao Xian cut the stool next to him in half with his sword. The 2 pieces of wood broke apart and hit the curtain wall with a bang. The old man trembled in fear again. Xiao Xian withdrew his sword and pointed it at the wooden floor in front of the old man. He calmly said, If you tell me, you can still live. If you don't, I'll have to send you to see your accomplices. The old man panicked and raised his head, then lowered it again. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. The old man's body trembled, stuttering as he told Xiao Xian everything. He was a person who was afraid of death, so Xiao Xian didn't even need to spend much effort to tell him everything. He wanted to hide a little, but after being frightened by Xiao Xian, he didn't have any other intentions. He only begged Xiao Xian to spare his life. This old man was banished by a tribe living in the forest because he poisoned the tribe's people and stole the tribe's gemstones to trade with the slave master. He originally wanted to take his belongings and escape far away, but he did not expect that he would be targeted midway and robbed of his belongings. He almost lost his life on the way. When he escaped back to the forest, he did not dare to return to the tribe. With his ability, it was difficult to survive in the forest. Coincidentally, the old man met a group of adventurers who ventured deep into the forest to search for Gongjia Mountain. Using his knowledge of the forest, he became their guide. Later, during the search for Gongjia Mountain, some died, some were injured and some left. In the end, there were only 8 people left, and this old man was one of them. The rest of them did not insist on searching for Gongjia Mountain. They changed their strategy and began to rob people who came to search for Gongjia Mountain. If they met someone who looked difficult to deal with, they would not attack easily. However, if they saw a fat sheep, they would kill them without hesitation. However, most of the people who came looking for Gongjia Mountain were quite capable. Although they managed to kill quite a few people in the end and hung their skulls in the house as trophies, there were casualties in the process too. Their team had gone from 8 to 4. With fewer people, they had to be more careful when choosing their targets. They would not attack easily, but they were greedy too. It had been a long time since they last attacked. It was rare for them to meet Xiao Xian, who did not look like a threat. Then, they thought about the Xia people who were not with him and knew that Xiao Xian must have encountered something special. He either found Gongjia Mountain or attacked the Xia people. No matter what, he must have a lot of good stuff on him. Driven by greed, they decided to kill Xiao Xian. That was why they sent out bait, which was the fat duck. Speaking of which, this duck was trained by the old man. The old man had some experience in training birds. In the past, he often trained birds to steal from other people in the tribe. However, when he was discovered, he was chased out of the tribe. Hence, to show his worth, the old man used his old trick. He caught a fat duck in a trap and trained it for half a year. Then, he used it as bait to lure others to the trap. Strictly speaking, to train such a fat duck, it would take 2 to 3 years or even longer, and it would be best to start from the moment it hatched. However, the conditions were limited, and the old man could only use some other techniques to make up for it. Although they were a little extreme and could easily cause the target to have rebellious thoughts, the old man did not hesitate to use them in order to show his usefulness as soon as possible. There were not many animals here and food was hard to find. Anyone who saw this fat duck would have their own thoughts. Xiao Xian understood now. No wonder the duck did not seem close to these people. It must have developed rebellious thoughts during the training. After explaining everything, the old man carefully looked at Xiao Xian. This time, he would spare his life, right? Xiao Xian stood up and looked at the cowering old man on the ground. These people on the wall, are they your targets? Yes. Yes, the old man answered in a trembling voice. Then, he explained, I didn't do anything. They killed them, it's all them. Xiao Xian stared at the old man for a long time. The old man was so guilty that he broke out in a cold sweat. Only then did he leave. At the same time, he took a few bronze wares with him. These people had gotten a lot of benefits from the robbery. Medicine, money, weapons, everything. Xiao Xian played dirty and took everything away. Chapter 423. Xiao Xian did not touch the old man. He just took the things and left. If you want to rob someone, you have to be prepared to be robbed and killed as well. When he came down from the tree, Xiao Xian did not see the fat duck. There was only a piece of rope tied to the tree, and the other end was pecked off. Xiao Xian was not interested in the duck's whereabouts. He went to the place where he killed the robber. The man's face was blurred, like a melted wax figure. It was very strange. Xiao Xian tried to dig up some of the poisonous grass, but the grass withered quickly after he left. Xiao Xian only took a few of the withered grass, but after testing it with prey, he found that the poison of the grass, which could kill a senior totemic warrior, was greatly reduced after it withered. The more it withered, the less poisonous it was. It could not even kill an ant. Xiao Xian could only give up. It was useless to take it away like this. Perhaps these strange plants could only grow in this place. Xiao Xian continued to walk in the direction of his plan. When he passed by the treehouse, he heard a loud bang. It sounded like a large piece of wood had fallen and broken. He also heard the old man's angry curses and the ducks quacking. It sounded like they were fighting. Ah, there was a scream, followed by the old man's hysterical roar. Damn it all. Xiao Xian did not go over to look. He continued to take the things he packed and left. On the other side, the treehouse had collapsed. After Xiao Xian left, the old man spat at the door and continued to curse. However, his voice was much softer. He didn't dare to curse too loudly for fear of attracting the little devil's attention. Just as he was feeling lucky to be alive, the old man saw a green figure fly into the house. It quickly scratched the old man's head and ran away. The few strands of hair on the old man's head were still stuck to his scalp and blood. Not only that, the fat duck left a few deep claw marks on the old man's head. If its claws were longer, sharper, and stronger, it might have clawed through the old man's head. After being hit like this, the old man cried out in pain and swung his axe. He had just been frightened, and now this fat bird was rebelling. He was so angry that smoke was coming out of his head. He vigorously swung his axe around and swung it around. But the fat duck was not slow. It darted around the house. The old man did not cut off the duck's head. Instead, he made a mess of the house. The wooden house, which was not very sturdy, fell from the tree and broke into pieces. The old man, who had fallen to the ground, picked himself up from the ruins. He grabbed the chipped axe and continued to chase after the duck. But in the forest, the duck was much more agile than the old man. Fat Duck seemed to be playing with him. It led him around in circles, occasionally giving him a claw. It usually worked obediently, mostly because it was afraid of the others. In terms of fighting power, the old man was the weakest. Now that the others were dead, only the old man was left. The fat duck did not want to listen to him. It would not give up such a good opportunity to turn the tables. As it led the angry old man around, the fat duck led him to a nearby trap. Most of the traps were set by the other three. The old man did not know that the scream Xiao Xian heard was when the old man's leg was caught in a wooden trap. After the old man fell into a trap, he was trapped by a lasso. He did not have the axe in his hand. He could not get out of the trap. The fat duck hit him a few more times before running away and spreading its wings. Not long after the fat duck left, the sky in the forest darkened. A black figure stopped on a nearby tree and stared at the old man. Not long after, another similar bird flew over. They were nocturnal and liked to eat rotten meat. If there was no rotten meat, they would create it. The old man was no stranger to these birds. In the past, he had fed them the corpses of others. Now that he saw the birds on the tree, he felt a sense of despair. In the silent night, a sudden scream broke the silence of the forest. It was accompanied by the sweet chirping of the birds. The scream became more intense. Some of the beasts hiding in the dark smelled the blood in the air. They followed the smell and joined in the feast. As for Xiao Xian, he had already found the way. He did not rest in a cave. Xiao Xian rested on a tree. Before closing his eyes to rest, Xiao Xian looked at a tree not far away. There, behind the bushes, was a fat figure. It thought it had hidden well. Xiao Xian ignored it. He had used up a lot of energy to deal with the three robbers. It was time to recover. The next day, Xiao Xian woke up and continued on his way. Not far from Xiao Xian, the fat duck continued to follow him. Sometimes, when Xiao Xian saw it, it would fly away. When Xiao Xian turned around and did not look, it would continue to follow. Xiao Xian did not understand. What was this fat duck thinking? One day, as Xiao Xian was hurrying on his way, he suddenly heard a terrible quack from behind him. While flying over a tree, the fat duck was swatted down by a large bird in the sky. A few of its feathers were broken. After the fat duck landed on a branch, it was entangled by a snake. Its small claws could not scratch the snake's body. The duck's neck was bitten by the snake. It could not even make a sound. Xiao Xian swung his sword and cut the snake in half. He lifted the duck's leg and shook it. The duck's neck swayed with it. It had lost consciousness. It was poisoned. It probably did not have long to live. Xiao Xian looked at the motionless duck and tied its leg with a straw rope. He carried it away and picked up the snake. He would roast it and eat it later. Many of the poisonous snakes in this forest were very poisonous. He did not know how long this duck would last. Xiao Xian felt it was a pity. It would not taste good if it was poisoned. At night, Xiao Xian rested in a cave. This was one of the resting spots on the mountain path. There was a stone pot Xiao Xian had made. He roasted some beast meat, boiled a pot of soup and threw the snake in. Xiao Xian looked at the fat duck on the ground. Just then, the duck woke up. It raised its head and met Xiao Xian's gaze. Quack! The duck wanted to dodge, but the snake venom was not completely gone. Its wings and legs were weak, so it fell back to the ground. Xiao Xian looked at the duck, wondering if he should cook it. Since it could wake up, it meant the venom was gone and it was not in danger. It was perfect for cooking. The fat duck's feathers bristled under Xiao Xian's stare. It quacked again, trying to put up a brave front. Xiao Xian turned around, picked up a stone stick and stirred the pot. He looked at the snake. Although it was not the most poisonous snake here, it was not to be underestimated. Even an advanced totemic warrior had to be wary of it. However, this fat duck had cured itself so quickly without any antidote. That's right. The poisonous plants that grew in that place were more toxic than other places. Presumably, the fat ducks that lived in that place would also have a high resistance to poison. Xiao Xian looked at the fat duck, not sure what he meant. It was surrounded by roasted and cooked food, but the duck was not interested. It fell asleep again, probably because the venom was still there. The next day, Xiao Xian was woken up by the duck's quacking. The duck pecked at the straw rope that bound its legs and ran out quickly. Xiao Xian did not stop it. The stone blocking the hole was still there. The duck could only squeeze out through the gap between the stone and the hole. It almost got stuck. When Xiao Xian got up and moved the rock away, he looked outside to see the fat duck pecking at the grass not far away. It even hopped and flew for a while. Looking at its hopping, the snake venom was completely gone. The hungry duck was looking for food. Xiao Xian did not care. He just did what he needed to do. After eating the leftover roast meat from yesterday, Xiao Xian continued on his way. The fat duck that was pecking in the bushes stopped looking for food when it saw Xiao Xian walk away. It hurried to catch up. This time, it followed closer than before. However, Xiao Xian's speed made it difficult for the duck. After passing through the monkey forest, Xiao Xian came to the river again. He looked around. He did not know if the giant crocodile was still around, but he did not want to take the risk. He did not plan to build a raft immediately. Xiao Xian took out a wooden whistle. Heng had made it from tree branches in the valley. He taught Xiao Xian how to blow it. As for whether the hammer bird would listen to him, Heng was not sure. Following Heng's instructions, Xiao Xian blew the whistle. Not long after, a bird flew over from the other side of the river. It was the hammer bird. However, when it saw Xiao Xian, it did not land immediately. After Xiao Xian said a few words and gave it a prey, the hammer bird reluctantly agreed. While the hammer bird was eating, the fat duck landed from the sky and hid behind Xiao Xian, watching him cautiously. The fat duck was afraid of a bird so much bigger than itself. After a full meal, the hammer bird happily brought Xiao Xian across the river. The fat duck continued to follow behind. The hammer bird did not even want to look at it. It did not care about a tiny thing like this. When they crossed the river, Xiao Xian did not see the giant crocodile. They reached the other side smoothly. Xiao Xian would rest at Heng's place for 2 days before leaving. He did not enter Heng's stone house but rested in the treehouse he had slept in before. The fat duck rested outside, not far away. It knew that it would be eaten if it followed Xiao Xian, but it still followed. It did not have the ability to live in the forest. Perhaps it had been trained by the old man and lost some of its wildness. It relied on humans to a certain extent. When everyone else died, it had vented its anger towards the old man and felt that it could no longer live in the forest, so it followed Xiao Xian here. However, it did not expect that after leaving the forest, there would be even more ferocious beasts in the forest outside. There were birds flying in the sky that could kill it with a single swipe of their claws. It could see them all the time. After days of fear, the duck was so scared that it lost a lot of weight. Xiao Xian suspected that the duck had Stockholm syndrome. In tribesmen's words, this was the prelude to being tamed. Chapter 424. Xiao Xian tested it a few times. Although the duck was still cautious of him, if there were any dangerous creatures around, it would immediately run towards Xiao Xian, quacking as it ran. Should he really bring it back to the tribe? Or should he just eat it? Xiao Xian thought about it carefully. This duck had a special constitution. If he could tame it, he could bring it back to the tribe. However, Xiao Xian observed its tail feathers. It was most likely a male duck. It couldn't lay eggs if he brought it back. Should he just eat it? Plus, there were no female ducks in the tribe. After some consideration, Xiao Xian decided to continue watching. If the duck could follow him back to the tribe, he would just keep it there. He would just treat it as an experiment to raise a bird. After resting in Heng's house for a few days, Xiao Xian set off again. This time, Xiao Xian did not walk through the shallow swamps. Instead, he took a longer route to see what the other areas were like. It was to enrich the map. The duck continued to follow him. It seemed to have become a habit. Seeing that Xiao Xian had not eaten or beaten it, and had even helped it a few times, it followed even closer. Seeing the familiar forest again, Xiao Xian's heart relaxed a little, and he shouted faster. There were other movements in the forest. Xiao Xian heard human voices. The tribesmen were hunting. Swoosh! An arrow shot out from the forest, aimed at the duck following Xiao Xian closely. It could not be helped. The duck was too conspicuous in this forest. When it flew, it was like a live target. It would be fine if the hunters did not care for such a prey, but if they did, it would be hard for the duck to escape. After all, the duck's stamina had decreased greatly after following them for such a long time. It was not as fast as it had been at the start. It would be difficult for it to dodge the arrows that suddenly came at it. Xiao Xian noticed it and blocked it with his sword, deflecting the arrow behind him. Who's there? A shout came from the forest, and several figures rushed over. It was Tao Zhang and Yu. This area belonged to their hunting group. The first thing that came to their mind was that someone from another tribe had entered their hunting grounds. However, after seeing Xiao Xian, their vigilance immediately faded. Xiao Xian! Elder! You're back! Xiao Xian had left the tribe for some time. It was said that he had something important to do. Some people knew the reason, while others didn't. They only knew that after Xiao Xian left, the chief and the others had been very worried. Every time the hunting team went out to hunt, the chief would remind them to be careful. If Xiao Xian came back, they should immediately send someone to inform him. Should I go back and inform the leader? Tao Zheng asked. Xiao Xian waved his hand. No need. I can go back by myself. You guys continue hunting. Elder Xiao Xian, what is that behind you? Is it your prey? A young man in the group asked. He was the one who shot the arrow, and now he was embarrassed to face Xiao Xian. He felt like he had stolen the elder's prey. Xiao Xian looked at the fat duck resting on a tree not far behind him, and said to Tao Zheng and the others, I guess so. Xiao Xian was also carrying a big package wrapped with animal skins and vines. Everyone in the hunting group glanced at the package curiously. What's inside? Tao Zheng asked with interest. Metal, Xiao Xian said. Hearing this, the others were curious, but now was not the time to chat. They could only suppress their curiosity and continue hunting. After bidding farewell to Tao Zheng and the others, Xiao Xian hunted 2 more prey, and then went back to the tribe. In the tribe, the shamaness and Chief Xing Luo heard that Xiao Xian had returned, and personally went down the mountain to welcome him. That bird! In front of the man-made river around the tribe, someone pointed at a bird resting on a tree on the other side of the river and shouted. The fat duck was cautiously looking at the Yanjiao people. That bird, as long as it doesn't attack or cause trouble for the tribe, don't bother with it, Xiao Xian said to the people at the foot of the mountain. So it belonged to the elder. The people at the foot of the mountain immediately nodded solemnly, promising not to kill it. Xiao Xian wanted to explain, but the shamaness dragged him up the mountain, as if she had a lot of questions. Xiao Xian didn't bother to explain, and decided to come back when things were settled. They went up the mountain and threw the prey at the door. Seeing that Xiao Xian was busy, some people volunteered to help Xiao Xian take care of the prey. After thanking them, Xiao Xian went to the shamaness and briefly told them what happened. When they heard Xiao Xian say that outsiders could not enter Gongjia Mountain, the shamaness and chief felt it was a pity. However, when they saw what Xiao Xian took out from the animal skin scroll, their eyes lit up and they forgot about their regret. Zheng Luo hurriedly took out a piece of animal skin and picked out a few key points to copy again. He could not wait to discuss it with the tribe's blacksmith. Zheng Luo's interest in forging weapons was no less than the tribe's blacksmiths, but he could not find the key points of the technique. After all, the tribes who knew a little about forging would keep it a secret and not let others learn it. What Xiao Xian took out was a few key points to the core of the technique. It helped Zheng Luo solve the problem that had been troubling him. Although it wasn't enough to enlighten him, it was very inspiring. Take a look at these. You can reforge the rusty ones. Xiao Xian took out the items he took from the robbers and handed them to Zheng Luo. The quality of the weapons varied. The good ones could be used immediately while the bad ones had to be reforged. Zheng Luo rubbed his palms and left hurriedly with the items. Only Xiao Xian and the shamaness were left in the house. Xiao Xian told her about activating the bone ornaments. Good. Very good. The shamaness' smile deepened. If there's nothing else, you can continue. I'll clear a place for you to practice in the tribe. It's better here than in the forest. You won't have to worry about the threats around you. Xiao Xian stayed a little longer at the shamaness place before returning to his own house. When he returned, the prey had already been taken care of. Chi was already waiting in front of Xiao Xian's house. When he saw Chi, who could barely hold back her smile, Xiao Xian knew that the planting of the 1,000-grain gold had been successful. Elder Xiao Xian, you're back. The 1,000-grain gold is growing very well. Come and take a look. Chi eagerly led Xiao Xian to the backyard. When Xiao Xian passed by the house, he only saw that the backyard had been widened. The fence had been raised so he couldn't see what was inside. Now that he was home, he walked to the backyard and saw the 3-meter-tall plants in the field. Xiao Xian was stunned. When he saw the 1,000-grain gold plants in the wilderness, they weren't like this. They weren't as tall as these. When Xiao Xian left the tribe, there were 34,000-grain gold plants in the backyard. At that time, each plant wasn't even as tall as Xiao Xian's shoulder. Now, there were only 23 plants left, but each one was growing very well. Not only were they taller than a person, their leaves were wider and thicker than the ones in Xiao Xian's memory. The stalk was almost as thick as a person's waist. Most importantly, these 1,000-grain gold plants were starting to produce grains. Even if Xiao Xian was an idiot, he knew that the plants in the backyard were growing much better than the ones in the wilderness. He just didn't know what the grains would be like. If they were worth more than what he paid, Xiao Xian would plant the rest of the seeds. In the yard, the Yanjiao people and the Taihe tribesmen gathered around. They never got tired of staring at the 20,000-grain gold plants. In the past, they would come to Xiao Xian's house twice a day. Now, they practically slept in this small yard. This was one of the reasons why they expanded the backyard. Back then, everyone wanted to stay here, but the yard is only so big. It was the shaman who told us to expand it. Chi carefully looked at Xiao Xian's expression. Seeing that Xiao Xian wasn't angry, she felt relieved. Thank you all for your hard work. Xiao Xian thanked them. It's not hard at all. It's all worth it. Chi felt proud and accomplished as she looked at the plants in the field. When they returned to the tribe, Xiao Xian's tense nerves finally had a chance to rest. He slept especially soundly that night. In the next few days, Xiao Xian was summoned by Zheng Luo to discuss forging. His status in the tribe aside, Xiao Xian knew the Xia people and had even gone to Gongjia Mountain. The Yanjiao craftsmen believed everything he said. They would ask Xiao Xian if they didn't understand the records he brought back. Xiao Xian also briefed everyone on the development of the core seed and the Xia people so they had a basic understanding. A few days had passed when Xiao Xian left the mountain again. On this day, Xiao Xian planned to check on the fat duck. The people living at the foot of the mountain and the patrolling guards all knew that the fat duck flying around on the other side of the river was Elder Xiao Xian's prey. No one dared to touch it. Some people even threw food at it. On the first day, the fat duck was uneasy in a foreign place. It was constantly worried and would fly away at the slightest sound. Later, it realized that the people didn't try to kill it and it even got a lot of food. Although it didn't eat much of it, it was still good to get free food, so it continued to stay. On the second day, the fat duck tested the underground water. It swam in the man-made river in front of the Yanjiao tribe, but when people passed by, it would immediately fly away and hide in the forest. It would only fly back when there was no one around. The third day, the fourth day, when Xiao Xian came to check on it, the fat duck was leisurely paddling in the river in front of the tribe. Occasionally, it would dive into the water. Even when people came close, it only looked at them cautiously but didn't fly away immediately. This duck didn't want to leave. Seeing that it was alive and well, Xiao Xian didn't chase it away. He just asked people to keep an eye on it so it wouldn't cause any trouble. Until one day, Xiao Xian noticed that there were a few female ducks in the river in front of the tribe. Chapter 425. Compared to the other beasts in the forest, this fat duck was closer to humans. Sometimes it would fly off into the distance, but it would return before dark to rest in the forest on the other side of the river. During the day, it would continue to roam around the river and the forest on the other side of the river. Because this area was close to the Flaming Horn tribe, there were no other dangerous beasts around, so it was safe for the duck. Once it grew bolder and got used to the environment, it would start to get restless. According to the people who often observed the fat duck, it disappeared for half a day at first. When the people at the foot of the mountain were worried that it was missing and were about to report to Xiao Xian, they found that it had returned with another bird. After the two left, the fat duck returned with another bird. Just like that, it brought back a bird every 1 or 2 days. These birds didn't all look the same. Some had sharp beaks, some had flat beaks, some had long wings, some had short wings, some had bright feathers, some had dark feathers, some liked to rest in the trees, some liked to rest in the grass. Even though the birds brought back by fat duck were all different, they were similar in form. They looked very similar to ducks and might be related to one another in history. In the past, the tribesmen would definitely hunt down the birds when they saw them. It would be a waste not to take prey that was delivered to their doorstep. But that fat duck belonged to Xiao Xian, so no one dared to touch it. No one touched the other birds either. The people at the foot of the mountain were now interested in counting ducks. Whenever they had time, they would go to the river to see if there were more ducks today. "Hey, how many are there now?" asked a warrior on patrol duty. 17. "There were 15 yesterday," said another warrior happily. "I can't believe these birds increased by themselves." "What are you talking about?" "Elder Xiao Xian's bird lured them here." As expected of an elder, he only brought back one bird and now there are 17. Said the man enviously. "But these birds don't look tasty. They're small and don't have much meat. They look like normal birds too. What does Elder Xiao Xian need so many birds for?" Someone was puzzled. Since Elder Xiao Xian did this, he must have his reasons. Let's not think too much about it. We just have to keep an eye on those birds and make sure they don't attack them. "Stop talking, it's time to take a detour," the leader scolded. Compared to the fat duck, the others were more timid and vigilant. After all, the fat duck had interacted with humans before, so it was easier for it to adapt to human territory. However, the others were different. If someone approached the river, those that were still swimming in the water would immediately scream and run away. They would only return after a long time, and some would disappear for days. Therefore, in order not to scare the birds away, even if the people at the foot of the mountain went to count, they would keep a distance. After a long time, they also figured out a safe distance. As long as they were outside this distance, the birds would not be scared away. For this reason, when the people on patrol walked to the river, in order not to scare the birds away, they would change their path. Therefore, when the hunting team returned, a flock of ducks happened to pass by. With a series of quacking sounds, the flock of ducks that were swimming on the river all flew up, screaming and running away. The hunting team returned with a full load. Someone wanted to shoot a few down with a bow, but as soon as he took out his bow, he saw the patrolman in the tribe rush over like the wind and punch the person holding the bow away. The rest of the hunting team were speechless. What happened when we weren't around? When the patrolman told them what had happened, the hunting team quickly put away their bows. However, the flock of ducks that had been scared away could not be called back for now. Will they come back? Duo Kong asked. Yes. I guess, but it will take a while. If the elder's flock only comes back, then the others will probably come back too. The leader of the patrolmen hesitated. Young elder wants to keep birds. The elder doesn't care. Those birds flew here on their own. At first, there was only one, but then there were more and more of them. I counted 20 today. The leader of the patrolmen smiled, but when he thought about whether those birds would be scared away by the hunting team and not come back, the smile on his face faded. He was worried. After all, the hunting team was still covered in blood and murderous aura. It was different from usual. Worried, the leader of the patrolmen went up the mountain and told Xiao Xian about what had happened. Don't worry. As long as the fattest one comes back, even if the others don't all come back, there will be more members joining us in the future. Xiao Xian said. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, the leader of the patrolmen was not worried anymore. However, every time he was on duty, he would glance at the river to see if the birds had come back, and how many had come back. The flock of ducks was probably really scared. This time, they came back much slower. Only 15 of them came back. However, when everyone saw that the fattest green one was still there, they were no longer worried. As long as that one was there, it would attract more of them. Xiao Xian did not expect this at all. He thought that if the fat duck settled down near the tribe, it would attract a few female ducks. However, Xiao Xian still underestimated the ability of the fat duck. It actually attracted a flock of ducks. Now, the fat duck's harem was still expanding. It seemed that bringing the fat duck back was the right choice. If the female ducks laid eggs in the future, and the ducklings hatched, maybe some of them would inherit the fat duck's detoxification ability. The male ducks could be eaten, and the female ducks could be slowly tamed. Let's see if they could lay as many eggs as possible. It did not matter if the second-generation ducks would develop as Xiao Xian expected. It was still early. There were not even eggs yet, let alone second-generation ducks. One day, Xiao Xian had just returned from the tribe's copper workshop when he saw people guarding the door. There were 2 warriors patrolling the foot of the mountain, a woman, and a child who did not even reach Xiao Xian's waist. What's wrong? Xiao Xian asked. Seeing that Xiao Xian had returned, the woman who had been waiting there excitedly walked up to him and took out something carefully wrapped in animal skin. My child found this in the river last night. It should be yours. The woman handed the egg to Xiao Xian. Usually at night, the ducks would leave the man-made river and enter the forest to rest in their nests. Some of the ducks built their nests in trees, while others built their nests in the grass. Xiao Xian had seen them before. No matter what kind of wild duck it was, they would not lay eggs as often as domesticated birds. Where did you find this egg? Xiao Xian asked the child. In the grass by the river. There were no ducks in the river at night. Sometimes, children like them would go to the river to play out of curiosity. He did not expect to find an egg in the grass by the river last night. He was overjoyed. After telling his parents, he went up the mountain to find Xiao Xian with the 2 patrolling warriors. Xiao Xian looked at the egg and saw that it was cracked. He returned the egg to the child. Take this egg back and eat it. Eat a little first. If there's nothing else, eat the rest. Looking at the egg in front of him and seeing that Xiao Xian did not seem to be joking, the child grinned. Thank you, elder. When I find more eggs, I will send them to you, elder. With this first egg, when the flock of ducks left at night, many people went to look for them. However, they rarely found any more eggs. Xiao Xian did see a few ducks in their nests, ranging from a few to a dozen eggs. Chapter 426. The wild ducks chose to build their nests in the forest near the tribe because they had accepted the environment and adapted to it. Perhaps it was the efforts of the fat duck as well. No matter what, this was not a bad thing for the tribe. Now, the patrol team had expanded their patrol area to the forest near the tribe. In the past, they would still patrol these areas, but not for long. Sometimes they would only patrol once every 1 or 2 days. Now, however, the patrol team would go for a stroll in the forest every day. Now, the patrol team had a new hobby, looking for eggs. When they found the nests of the wild ducks, they would pick up the broken eggs or the eggs that had fallen from the trees. If they could be eaten, they would eat them. If not, they would use them as fertilizer for the 1,000-grain gold. Even if these broken eggs were left in the nest, it would be difficult for the ducks to hatch a second generation. Xiao Xian wanted to see if these eggs were all seeds. Unfortunately, even if he faced Yang Guang, he could not see anything inside the eggs. The eggshells were not transparent at all. Xiao Xian could only give up on this idea and only let the men bring back the broken eggs. When the patrol team walked in the forest, they would be careful not to disturb the ducks in their nests. They would only look at them when they left. Otherwise, they would not go near them. These wild ducks were very clever. They built their nests in the grass, and when they left, they used the grass to cover the eggs in the nests. At first glance, no one would notice that there was a duck nest there. There were a few times when the patrolling soldiers quietly followed the ducks and watched them remove the grass to discover the duck nest. Compared to the hard work of the female ducks, the fat green duck that Xiao Xian brought back was very relaxed. Of course, it would also patrol the forest. If there were wild rats or other small creatures that it could handle, it would go into defensive mode and transform into a fighting duck. But if it encountered a human that it could not defeat, it would cry out loudly. When the patrol team heard its cry, they would immediately rush to its rescue. The people in the tribe were always very enthusiastic about new and useful things. They had nothing to do anyway. Some of the children would catch insects and throw them to the ducks when they had nothing to do. The female ducks probably felt that this place was safer than other places, so they felt more at ease. So one day, there were some new sounds in the forest near the tribe. Gray, yellow, and flowery balls of hair were active in the woods. Although there were patrols in the forest, they could not be everywhere at all times. The fat duck could not be there all the time. When these ducklings were born, they would attract some predators, so it was inevitable that the ducklings would be taken away. Even the mother ducklings were taken away. Xiao Xian ordered his men to bring the ducklings that had lost their mothers back to the tribe to be reared. The fat duck continued to turn a blind eye to this. In fact, after the second-generation ducklings were born, it did not show much interest in them. Although it continued to patrol the forest, it did not stop for the ducklings. The people in the tribe were very enthusiastic about these second-generation ducks. A large duck pen was specially built at the foot of the mountain. Xiao Xian also brought some people to build a duck shed. Every day, people would take turns to look after the ducks. Then one day, Xiao Xian received a report from the people at the foot of the mountain that the fat duck had moved in by itself. It did not even let the ducklings near it. Seeing how stubborn the duck was, Xiao Xian had no choice but to get someone to build a small shed next to the duck shed and lay some hay on it. Only then did he let the duck move over. Xiao Xian had discovered that the duck eggs he brought back had antidote properties, so he paid more attention to the ducks reared by the tribe. As for the ducks in the forest outside the tribe, Xiao Xian did not let his men catch all of them. It was the first time the tribesmen tried to feed ducks, so it was good to have a comparison. Plus, there were too many ducklings for the inexperienced tribesmen to take care of. It was better to let the older ducks take care of them. Other than the ducks, the craftsmen in the tribe also made great progress in forging. They melted down the large bronze cauldron Xiao Xian brought back and made other bronze wares. There were obvious improvements in weapon forging, but there was not enough ore for them to experiment with. What made Xiao Xian even happier was that the 1,000-grain gold in his backyard was about to ripen. The grains were starting to turn yellow. When they all turned gold, it would be almost ready. With his experience, Xiao Xian told everyone to pay attention to the changes that occurred when the grains ripened, such as rats and other things. According to Ji Ju and the others' estimates, the 1,000-grain gold harvest should be just in time for the tribe's first trip to Amba City this year. They had already accumulated animal skins for half a year. It was time to go out and trade them. Otherwise, they could not just leave them at home. Plus, for the Taiha tribesmen who were good at planting, harvest time was approaching. After they harvested, they would have to go out and trade. The Yanjiao people would naturally try their best to go with them and take care of them. However, at the end of last year, they had a small conflict with the people of Amba City. This year, they had to be more careful. Although they could take the sign directly to Black Bear's people, it was always better to be careful. The shamanists, Chief Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, Guang Yi, Xiao Xian and a few other people of status in the tribe gathered in Zheng Luo's house to discuss the trip to Amba City. Xiao Xian, the youngest, sat among them, so no one dared to look down on him. As they were talking, someone came to report that someone was looking for Xiao Xian at the foot of the mountain. Does this person have a name? Zheng Luo asked the warrior who came in. The warrior thought for a moment. He said his name is Heng. Zheng Luo and the rest's eyelids twitched and they immediately stood up. Quick, invite him in. Then he remembered that this person was looking for Xiao Xian, so he had to ask for Xiao Xian's opinion. He stopped the warrior who was about to leave and looked at Xiao Xian. What do you think? Xiao Xian stood up. I'll go down and take a look first. Many people would not easily enter an unfamiliar tribe. If something happened, they would not be able to escape. At this thought, Zheng Luo understood. However, he did not continue to sit in the house. Instead, he followed Xiao Xian down the mountain. As someone who was interested in blacksmithing, the Xia people had always been mysterious. If one wanted to find a Xia person in the city to forge a weapon, one would not be able to get the person to help unless they had enough items in exchange. Furthermore, the more skilled a Xia person was, the less likely they would help others. And every Xia person from Gongjia Mountain was a master. Although they were not very famous now, to these people, it was only a matter of time before they became famous. Once they became famous, it would be difficult to meet them again. This was a rare opportunity, of course Zheng Luo would not miss it. When Xiao Xian arrived at the foot of the mountain, Gongjia Heng was sitting on the grass near the river, looking at the ducks of different colors in the river. After living in the tribe for a long time, the ducks had lowered their guard against the tribesmen. They would even snatch the food after the tribesmen had spilled it. You have so many birds in your tribe? Aren't you afraid they'll fly away? Heng pointed at the ducks of all sizes in the river. Xiao Xian smiled. They flew here of their own accord. They can fly away if they want. Who are you trying to fool? Heng did not believe him. However, he did not come here to look at the ducks. He was just asking out of curiosity. He was not interested in whether the Yanjiao people raised them or how they raised them. I had to ask a few tribesmen before I found this place. When Gongjia Heng arrived, he saw a flaming horn warrior dragging a freshly hunted wild boar. He tossed it like a sandbag to his comrade 100 meters away. At that moment, Heng thought, Xiao Xian wasn't lying, people in this tribe are generally strong. Let's talk inside. I'm sure you're tired. Rest here for a few days before we depart, Xiao Xian said. Gongjia Heng did not stand on ceremony. Ever since he came here, other than resting for 2 days at the place where he had lived for almost 20 years, he had not had a good rest. There were many fearsome beasts in the forest too. He had been tense the entire time, avoiding the dangerous beasts. He was exhausted, he really needed a good rest. Although this was his first time in the Yanjiao tribe and he was unfamiliar with the place, he trusted Xiao Xian. After Xiao Xian introduced Heng to Zheng Luo and the rest, he brought Heng up the mountain to his house. Heng had brought a huge bag with him. Once he entered the house, he placed the bag on the stone table. There was a clatter of hard objects hitting the table. These are for you. Heng's face was solemn as he said to Xiao Xian, I haven't thanked you properly. These are part of the fruits of my labor at Gongjia Mountain. It's also a thank you gift. Xiao Xian looked at the contents of the bag. There were 10 weapons, swords, axes, spears and so on. Just by looking at them, he could feel a sharp aura. The blades glinted coldly and each weapon had a cloud symbol on it. It was Hang's own inscription. One of the golden swords had dark cloud symbols on it. It was Xiao Xian's name. Hang's eyes shone with pride and confidence. This is the sword I'm most proud of, other than the one I gave to Gongjia Mountain. It can break rocks easily. As he spoke, he scanned the room and saw a few fist-sized rocks in the corner. He strode over and picked one up. Look! Zheng Luo, Duo Kong, and the others who squeezed into the room craned their necks and stared without blinking, afraid to miss this exciting scene. They had long heard that among the weapons made by the Xia people, there were many that could easily break rocks and split them in half. However, they had to pay a hefty price to make these weapons. Plus, they had no way to find the Xia people to make them. Those masters usually didn't see outsiders. Now, they finally had the chance to witness this. How could they not be excited? They were so excited they couldn't even breathe. Hung held the golden sword in one hand and tossed the rock into the air with the other. The moment the rock was in the air, Hung raised his arm and swung his sword, pointing it at the rock in the air. When the sword slashed down, the golden light flashed with a sense of holiness. It was like a bolt of lightning in the dark night, as if it wanted to tear the sky apart. The people watching felt chills run down their spines. They almost shivered. Clang! Metal and rock collided with a crisp sound that pierced their eardrums. Rock powder flew everywhere. Slap, gurgle gurgle, the rock rolled to the ground. The blade was intact. There was no dent. There was a small dent in the rock. Xiao Xian, Heng, Zheng Luo, Duo Kong and the rest. Was this considered breaking the rock? Chapter 427. The room was so quiet it was awkward. This was different from what they had expected. Just now, it was like a hot knife cutting through butter. It felt like one swing of the sword would cut through the rock cleanly. In the end, the rock only had a small dent. Duo Kong looked at the rock on the ground, then at the sword in Heng's hand. He turned to glance at Zheng Luo. He wanted to say something but swallowed his words. Not just Duo Kong, even Gongjia Heng's bearded face was flushed with embarrassment. He wanted to show off but he failed. Cough, this rock is a little strange. The ones I tried before were all easily cut through. Heng did not know that a random rock he picked up from the house would be so hard. If it was a normal rock in the forest, he would have cut through it with one swing. He really didn't expect to encounter such a situation. He simply wished he could just end his own life. Xiao Xian was shocked. He walked over and picked up the rock. When he saw the dent, he was pleasantly surprised. Great sword! Xiao Xian praised. Heng was speechless. Don't say anything, I want to kill myself. When he saw Heng's expression, Xiao Xian knew what he was thinking. He explained, this is indeed the best sword I've ever seen. As for this rock, it's harder than the others. According to the stone tools we use, this rock is close to the highest quality. It's much harder than the others. Xiao Xian pointed at another rock in the corner. If it's that one, it'll be different. Xiao Xian had picked up the rock during a hunting trip. It was a good rock but too small to be made into a sword or spear. Xiao Xian had tossed it in the corner. He did not expect it to become Heng's testing stone. Heng was too lucky. This was good too. He did not need to show off. Xiao Xian handed Heng another rock. To Heng and the others, it did not look too different. It looked like any other rock in the forest. Try again, Xiao Xian said. Gongjia Heng wasn't as confident this time. However, for the sake of the Gongjia name, he couldn't leave a bad impression. Otherwise, if they were to mention that someone with the surname Gongjia came from Gongjia Mountain and made a sword that couldn't even cut a rock, Then Gongjia Heng would really run back to Gongjia Mountain to commit suicide. Taking a deep breath, Heng tossed the rock Xiao Xian handed him into the air. He clenched his teeth and swung his sword downwards. He held in all his strength, even more ferocious than before. Bang! The stone broke into two halves. Heng heaved a sigh of relief. However, his arrogance faded a little. He couldn't help it, he had just embarrassed himself. Even if he managed to salvage some of his pride, he had to admit that it was quite a blow. This also made him realize that his skills were still far from perfect. If he had more time and continued to improve, one day, he too would be able to crack that rock. Duo Kong picked up the two halves of the rock on the ground, casting his suspicions to the back of his mind. His eyes lit up as he stared at the sword in Heng's hand. However, he knew that the sword was for Xiao Xian. He just wanted to borrow it for fun when Xiao Xian didn't need it. Zheng Luo also admired Heng. As expected of a Xia person, he could break rocks so easily. No wonder the slave masters from the great 6 cities loved him so much. Heng passed the sword to Xiao Xian. He didn't introduce the other weapons now, instead asking Xiao Xian for advice on how to identify the rocks. This would make it easier for him to choose a rock to test his sword on after he made it. Otherwise, if an embarrassing incident like this happened again, he wouldn't have any face left. Fortunately, this was just a tribe living deep in the forest. If this happened in the great 6 cities, especially the royal city, the consequences would be worse. After witnessing Heng's sword, Zheng Luo and Duo Kong didn't stay. Heng still had things to discuss with Xiao Xian, so they didn't disturb him. Xiao Xian explained some methods to identify rocks, then asked about his future plans. I'll go directly to the royal city. I still have some elders and friends there that I need to visit. After all, I've been away for 20 years. I wonder how the royal city looks like now. Gongjia Heng sighed. Some people are so close to entering Gongjia Mountain, yet they can't even take that last step. Just like the corpses in Xia Valley, they died with great reluctance. The elders in the tribe say it's fate. I thought I'd follow in their footsteps, but I didn't expect to meet you, Xiao Xian. I've benefited a lot too, said Xiao Xian. Heng thought Xiao Xian was talking about the 10 weapons he gave away, so he waved his hand. That's nothing. When my skills improve in the future, if you want more weapons, you can come to me. Don't worry, I won't charge a high price. Heng paused, the muscles on his face twitching. Why did you step on the valley before you left? When Gongjia Heng came out of the mountains, he was in a daze from the continuous forging. He tripped over the pit and almost coughed up blood when he saw the letter Xiao Xian left him. Cough, that place is not bad. Xiao Xian quickly changed the topic. When are you going to the royal city? Our tribe is going out to trade soon. I'll go with the tribe then to the royal city. All right. If you don't have a place to stay in the royal city, you can come to me. Our Gongjia family lives together in the royal city. You can ask around when you get there. Heng was very happy that Xiao Xian could go to the royal city. I'll introduce you to a few Gongjia masters. If you need any weapons, you can go to them. Oh, wait, I'll be a master too. Ha ha ha. Heng's confidence, which had been shaken by Xiao Xian's rock, returned. Different people had different definitions of the title master. In the Yanjiao tribe, those who forged and repaired weapons were called craftsmen. It was the same in other tribes, but to those who were more particular, only those who had reached a certain level and achieved a certain level of results would be called masters or craftsmen. Otherwise, they were just regular craftsmen. In the past, Heng was also known as a Xia craftsman, but in the eyes of the Gongjia family, as well as some noble slave masters in the 6 tribes, he was not qualified. But now, after a trip to Gongjia Mountain and learning some secret techniques from his ancestors, his skills had improved. He could be called a master now. In the past, Gongjia Heng was indeed arrogant, but this arrogance was fake. Even Gongjia Heng himself felt a little guilty when he boasted. After all, he was not considered a genius among the Xia people. Otherwise, he would not have been trapped for 20 years while searching for Gongjia Mountain. He did not have much influence in the great 6 cities either, he could not compare to the more outstanding people in his tribe. But now, he was confident that he could turn the tables and make a name for himself in the city. The current Hung was like an ore that had been forged into a weapon. He had shed his initial form and become a more advanced and dazzling sword. Thank you in advance, Master Hung. Ha ha ha, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hung was elated. He was already imagining his glorious return to the royal city. However, when he saw the chipped stone, he calmed down. Gongjia Hung asked Xiao Xian for the missing rock. He had decided to use it as a sword test for the rest of his life. Our tribe uses knives, spears and axes. Can these weapons be better than this sword? Asked Xiao Xian. Of course, answered Hung. Because the slave owners liked swords, among the many weapons, the craftsmen made more swords. After all, in the place where the slave owners lived, there were not so many huge and fierce beasts. What are your requirements for these weapons? Even if he could not make them now, Hung wanted to think about it so he could be prepared when Xiao Xian asked him to make weapons. Xiao Xian thought for a while and said, "Make it bigger, it'll be more useful for hunting." Hung's eyelids twitched. So this was Yanjiao's style. Xiao Xian taught Hung many techniques to identify stone materials. In return, Hung gave some pointers to the tribe's craftsmen after his conversation with Jingluo. The Taiha tribesmen were jealous. They wanted to get some advice from Gongjia Hung, but they had no reason to. Gongjia Hung only spoke to the Flaming Horn craftsman because Xiao Xian had helped him before. As for the others, Master Hung was too arrogant to bother with them. The Xia people were arrogant because they believed no one could make a better weapon than them even if they were to forge a weapon in front of other people. He was just giving pointers to the Yanjiao craftsmen too. Hung did not feel pressured at all.
In the 2 days he stayed at the Yanjiao tribe, he could feel the warmth of the Yanjiao people. When he left, they even gave him a roasted beast leg. The leg was bigger than his entire body. However, to Hung, it was inconvenient to carry such a huge beast leg around in the forest. He only cut off a piece and brought some jerky with him before leaving. Before he left, he reminded Xiao Xian that if Xiao Xian went to the royal city, he should bring him some 1,000 gold. In exchange, he would make more weapons. Although Hung did not know much about farming, he had seen a lot. He could feel the uniqueness of these grains. When they heard this, the Yanjiao people's anticipation for the 1,000 gold grew even stronger. Now, the grains on the 1,000 gold ears were like grapes. They were much bigger than the soybean-sized grains Xiao Xian had seen before. The heavy ears drooped, waiting to be harvested when they were ripe. As he watched the 1,000 gold ripen, Xiao Xian thought about the old man who had discovered the 1,000 gold with him. How was he doing now? The Ji people should not have any problems. Xiao Xian planned to ask the old man if there were any other ways to plant the 1,000 gold.
Chapter 428. Days passed. As the 1,000 gold on the mountain ripened, there were strange movements in the forest below the mountain. The ducks were so scared that they started to move deeper into the tribe to seek shelter. The number of people patrolling in the tribe had increased every day, and most of them were patrolling in the forest outside the tribe. This was because many wild rats had appeared during this period of time. There were many kinds of wild rats, big ones, small ones, burrowing ones and jumping ones. It wasn't just rats, there were also birds in the sky. There were often flocks of birds flying around. Now, Xiao Xian's house was surrounded by Jingluo's men. They had enough bows and arrows, shooting down one rat and a flock of them. Other than normal beasts, there were also fearsome beasts. However, they weren't large beasts since they were far away from the tribe. Some people even joked that they didn't need to go out hunting. They could just wait for the birds to come to them. Quan Bai and the others from the Taiha tribe said that if Yanjiao didn't have enough people, they could send reinforcements, but Xingluo rejected them. Their tribe could handle this themselves. They didn't need the Taihe people's help. Plus, the Taihe people wouldn't help for nothing. They would definitely ask Xiao Xian for a reward. The reward they were interested in was naturally the ripe 1,000-grain gold. Zheng Luo couldn't bear to give away so much of the good stuff. Quan Bai and the others had helped with the planting of the 1,000-grain gold, so they didn't object if he gave them a little as a reward. He couldn't bear to give more. When the patrol team was changing shifts, the person who came to take over looked at the piles of rats on the ground and asked the person who had just finished his work, "How many did you catch today?" "I don't know about the others, but I've caught more than 30 by myself." "Almost 40. The warrior who spoke walked over with a rat half the length of an arm. Although he looked worried, he was also happy. These rats could be used as food too. The chief said that they could keep half of what they caught. They didn't need to go out hunting to get 20 rats of this size. If they didn't eat them, they could give them to their families. It had only been half a day and they already had such a harvest. "We caught more than yesterday." The person who just came over stretched his arms and took out an arrow. Whoosh! A wild rat that wanted to sneak through the grass was nailed to the ground. The soldier didn't pick it up immediately. Instead, he shot 3 arrows in a row. 2 of the arrows nailed the long-tailed wild rat with thick fur on the tree, and the other arrow shot towards the tree not far away. The gray short-haired wild rat that had just revealed half of its body was killed by the arrow. "All right, leave this to me. You've been tired for half a day. Go back and rest." The soldier picked up the 3 wild rats that he had killed and said to the other soldier. The warrior who had been standing guard for most of the day finally had the time to tie up the fruits of the morning with a straw rope and carry them back. When he left, he was still reluctant to part with them. The warriors who had returned to rest gathered in groups of 3 to 5 and chatted about their gains. However, there was also something to be worried about. These days, the wild rats coming over are getting bigger and bigger, and they are moving faster and faster. We have to continue to send more people. A few days ago, it was very easy to guard them, but now it's getting a little too busy. We almost missed one. It's the same for me. We have to be more careful next time. Fortunately, there is a river in front of our tribe. Some wild rats can't swim and can't cross it. There are many wild rats that can swim. Don't be careless. As they spoke, they looked towards the peak of the mountain. There were some birds circling in the sky. Occasionally, a bird would dive down and be shot down by the arrows. After another 2 days, the wild rats were even crazier. They continued to send more people. All the warriors in the tribe were on the move, and a portion of them stayed on the mountain. Xiao Xian didn't expect the 1,000-grain gold to attract so many birds and rats this time. Although the few grains he saw before also attracted a group of rats, there weren't so many birds. In the backyard of Xiao Xian's house, the entire yard was covered with a large net to prevent birds from diving down and destroying the 1,000-grain gold if they didn't shoot in time. It should be soon. Chi looked at the golden grains with a smile on her face. According to their thinking, the bigger the changes, the more extraordinary the crops were. This was a good thing. Watch, keep your eyes open. Don't miss a single one, Duo Kong said to the warriors outside. The warriors all had their own markings on their arrows. Once they hit the target, they would know who the prey belonged to. To the warriors, the prey was small but the contribution was big. If they made a big contribution this time, they might be rewarded by Elder Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian discussed with Xing Luo and announced publicly that the remaining 9 weapons Gongjia Heng left behind would be given to outstanding warriors in the tribe. There were limited places, so those who wanted it had to work harder. It was no wonder the people in the tribe were so excited. No matter if they were young or old, they all looked like they were on steroids. Sometimes, they would come in shifts but they didn't want to leave. Before the 1,000-grain gold ripened, Xiao Xian discussed with the others what to do. Based on the current situation, the birds were already behaving like this before the 1,000-grain gold ripened. What would happen when the 1,000-grain gold ripened? Xiao Xian shuddered at the thought of those crazy wild rats in the mountain, and then looked at the flock of birds in the sky, as well as the groups of wild rats of different shapes and sizes that the warriors in the forest brought out. Even if these were just wild animals, when there were too many of them, they would still cause a lot of trouble. Especially when they lost their minds. Due to the continuous disturbance from the birds and rats, the ducks all hid. The funny thing was, the fat duck even opened the door to the duck shed and let many ducks in. When he saw this, Xiao Xian told the tribesmen who were not involved in the defense to separate the ducks from the others. Then, he opened the door to the duck shed so the fat duck could bring the ducks in. In the sky, the birds were also fighting because of the competition. They fought all day long. Feathers were white as snow and bird droppings were everywhere. Xiao Xian's roof was covered in a layer of bird droppings and feathers. The smell was, however, for the 1,000-grain gold. Xiao Xian endured it. On this day, Xiao Xian was guarding beside the 1,000-grain gold. It's one of these 2 days, right? Chi Chi asked Xiao Xian as she looked at the feathers falling from the sky like snowflakes. Xiao Xian stared at the heavy ears of the 1,000-grain gold. After a moment, he said, I think it's today. Chi Chi and Jingluo's hearts skipped a beat. Chi Chi took a few steps back and stood inside the house. She had no choice. She did not have much fighting power. At times like this, she had to make way for the warriors to move. Meanwhile, Jingluo had already called for his men to get ready. A whistle sounded in the forest at the foot of the mountain. When they heard the whistle, the people guarding the forest knew that this was a critical moment. The wild rats that were still hiding in the bushes and probing suddenly paused. Then, as if they had been stimulated, they no longer hid and rushed forward fearlessly. The birds in the sky stopped fighting. As if they had agreed, they charged towards Xiao Xian's backyard. It's ripe. Collect. Xiao Xian roared. Before he finished, he had already charged out and cut off all the grains, putting them into a bag he had prepared beforehand. It was not just Xiao Xian. Zheng Luo, Duo Kong and the rest who were guarding nearby also attacked. In the blink of an eye, the originally heavy golden ears of grain were swept clean. Even the grains that fell to the ground were picked up by the people who came later. When the birds in the sky swooped down, there were only 1,000 golden green plants left in the courtyard, but the ears of grain were nowhere to be seen. What greeted them was round after round of arrows. The birds chirped incessantly. After the 1,000-grain gold disappeared, the birds flew up again to avoid the tribesmen's attack range. However, they didn't leave. They just chirped unwillingly, as if they wanted to wait for a chance to see if more grains would grow there. The 1,000-grain gold was harvested when it was close to noon, but the flock of birds only left when night fell. The rats at the foot of the mountain had already retreated. Some warriors were fishing for drowned rats from the river. These rats were not good at swimming, but they rushed into the river with other rats that could swim. They broke through the warriors' defensive perimeter and drowned in the end. It was as if they were brainless. There were more than 1 or 2 rats like this. There were at least 30 rats that were picked up from the river. Now, the tribesmen were cleaning up the rats that had sneaked into the village. Xiao Xian looked at the 23 animal skin bags in the house. Including him, there were 23 people. Each person had a bag and each person was responsible for 1 plant. Although he did not count, Xiao Xian knew that there were more than 1,000 grains in each bag. There must be thousands to tens of thousands of grains. Ignoring the stench of bird droppings, Xiao Xian carefully opened the bag. Chi Chi, the shamaness, the chief and the others were waiting. Xiao Xian plucked a grain from the ear and carefully removed the shell. The dark gold shell was removed, revealing the purple gold grain inside. Why is it this color? Xiao Xian exclaimed. The grains he brought back from the peak were all gold in color. Why were they purple gold in color? This was too different from the previous grains. Xiao Xian then opened the other 22 bags. Inside each bag, there were 5 grains randomly plucked from different ears. When he finally peeled off the husks, he found that they were all purplish gold in color. Why did they change? Chi was puzzled. Xiao Xian did say that these grains were better than the ones he found before, but that did not mean they were different. The color difference was so big, was it a coincidence or was it inevitable? Did they grow normally or mutate? Xiao Xian thought about it. He felt that the reason for the change was probably the way they grew them. After all, they fed them so much beast meat. Chapter 429. To be sure, they could replant the grains and see what the results looked like. However, this method would take a long time and there was no time for a second planting this year. The second method was to look for Old Man Zhu and see what kind of 1,000-grain gold the old man had grown. No matter what the 1,000-grain gold looked like this time, no one would doubt its uniqueness. How could an ordinary grain cause such a huge commotion? The whole process of harvesting the grains was filled with tension. "Let's cook some first and see its effects," Xiao Xian said. To them, food was useful, good or bad for the body, good or bad. Although they couldn't tell exactly, they could tell if it was good or bad. Especially the shamanists and Quan Bai of the Taiha tribe were good at this too. They just needed to cook a pot and eat it. Xiao Xian peeled 115 grains. The husks were placed in a clay pot for the shamanists to study. The 1,000-grain gold without the husks were placed in a clay pot the shamanist brought over. She used to brew medicine in the past, but this time, for the 1,000-grain gold, she purposely cleaned the pot and placed it aside. Even the firewood was carefully selected. Xiao Xian's house was too small for too many people. There was also the smell of bird poop, so they moved to an empty warehouse. It wasn't used often and Zheng Luo had cleaned it up personally. The 23 people who harvested the 1,000-grain gold, including the shamanists, Chi, and a few others who were involved in planting the 1,000-grain gold, there were more than 30 people in total. They all sat around the cauldron. As for the Taiha tribesmen, they were invited to wait at the foot of the mountain. More than 100 grape-sized grains of 1,000-grain gold were placed into the cauldron. They were added with water, lit with firewood that had been prepared beforehand, and boiled. A light aroma spread. It was a little different from what Xiao Xian had smelled before, but it wasn't completely different. There were some similarities. More than 30 pairs of eyes stared at the small pottery cauldron. When it was done and the soup turned purple, the shaman took out a polished wooden spoon and scooped out a spoonful of the thick soup. He poured it into a pottery bowl and tasted it first. The shamanist's expression changed from tasting to thinking, then to joy and finally to ecstasy. Good. Xiao Xian knew that everyone's hard work was worth it to receive such a compliment from the shamanists. The shamanist picked up a wooden spoon and divided the granules in the cauldron, leaving only 10 granules. She placed them in another ceramic bowl for the people from Taiha. Xiao Xian felt that this time, it was much better than the last time. It was as if all the pores on his body had been opened, releasing turbid air.
Because he wasn't injured, didn't have any other illnesses, and didn't feel tired, Xiao Xian didn't have any deep feelings for the time being. However, when he saw the surprise on the faces of the others, he knew that the return had exceeded the effort, and it was worth continuing. "I feel like I've used up all my energy," said a warrior. "I feel like my injuries aren't as painful as before," said a warrior who was seriously injured in the last hunt. "I feel good. It's better than eating a wild boar," said Duo Kong. "How do we raise this? Next time, I'll hunt more prey for you." "Hee, you can share more with me then." "Hee. No, the 1,000-grain gold has more uses than that. I think it can bring us great benefits." The shamaness was happy. She just needed a little more time to find out more uses for the 1,000-grain gold. "Keep this." Zheng Luo pointed at the 23 bags he brought and said excitedly. They didn't have a definite answer about the benefits the 1,000-grain gold would bring them, but it was still good. They just had to wait for the shamaness to come up with a conclusion that would not disappoint them. "Plant more next year," said Chi-Chi. Even though she had only eaten one, she already felt full. Moreover, she felt refreshed all over. Her tired nerves and tired spirit were greatly relieved. Moreover, she also felt that the 1,000-grain gold's usefulness to them would not stop there. "If we take these to Amba City, we'll be able to exchange them for many good things," said Duo Kong, smacking his lips. Zheng Luo slapped Duo Kong as soon as he finished. "Bullshit. Of course I'm keeping it for myself. How could we trade them?" Duo Kong thought about it. That was true. They didn't even have much to share among themselves. Why should they trade them for others? They could just use animal skins. "Then when we go out in a few days, we won't bring these?" asked Duo Kong. "Other than what Xiao Xian brought, we don't need to bring anyone else," said Zheng Luo. They had agreed that Xiao Xian would bring some 1,000-grain gold out for Gongjia Heng when they went to the royal city. They would need his help to make weapons in the future. "Xiao Xian, how many grains are left from last year?" asked the shamaness. Xiao Xian thought for a moment. "We've used 250 grains. There are about 700 left. If possible, we'll plant them all next year. We'll plant some of this year's harvest and plant some next year. However, it'll be difficult to plant so many." The shamaness frowned. "I'll go to the royal city this time and see if we can find other planting methods," said Xiao Xian. The shamaness nodded. "That's the only way." 500 of the 1,000-grain gold were given to Quan Bai and the rest of the Taiha tribe. They had helped a lot and the Taiha people wanted more, but Zheng Luo refused to give it to them.
"We caught the fearsome beasts ourselves, our people came up with the idea, the seeds were ours and the last line of defense was our people. We didn't even have enough, how could we give you more? It was already good enough to give them these." Quan Bai and the rest went to Xiao Xian to complain. In the end, they got another 100 grains from Xiao Xian and left happily. They had failed to plant last year's seeds, so they would be unhappy if they didn't plant them again. As for the hundreds of new grains, they would plant them themselves next year. When they were harvested, they would have more. 3 days later, it was the agreed time to trade. Xiao Xian counted 1,000 grains and put them in a pouch before leaving with the trading team. The rest of the grains were left with the shamaness. The tribe had already discussed how to distribute the grains, so Xiao Xian didn't have to worry about it. After the trading team arrived at Amba City, the teams from both tribes didn't go directly to the free trading area. Xiao Xian took Black Bear's token and went to the place Black Bear mentioned. It was a small house with a yard. The yard was about 100 square meters. It wasn't big here and wasn't eye-catching. Xiao Xian knocked on the wooden door. "Who is it?" A rough voice came from inside and they could hear footsteps approaching. Creak, the wooden door opened and a tall and burly man walked out. His bear-like body wasn't as big as their leader, Black Bear, but not by much. His impatient tone changed when he saw Xiao Xian. He pointed at Xiao Xian with a finger as thick as a carrot. "Aren't you the one who carried the broken cauldron?" Carrying the cauldron was fine, but what did he mean by carrying the broken cauldron? Besides, the cauldron he brought back last year wasn't that broken. Without further ado, Xiao Xian took out the token Black Bear gave him. "Oh, it's really you guys? Yin Jiao. If you came 2 days later, you wouldn't have met us. We left for the royal city 2 days later," the burly man said. Chapter 430. Royal City. Xiao Xian paused. He didn't expect to run into the Black Bears heading to Royal City. He could consider going with the Black Bears to save himself the trouble of asking for directions. Also, it would be safer with the caravan. It was worth it even if he had to pay a little. However, he had to complete the tribe's trade first. "Your leader isn't here?" Xiao Xian asked. "The leader left a long time ago." We're waiting for a batch of goods here before bringing them over. Just in time, we've been waiting for your Yanjiao people, the brawny man said. The Yanjiao tribesmen brought good stuff. They earned quite a bit from selling the animal hides last time. They split the rest among themselves. It was nice to wear in winter. However, compared to the animal hides, they were more interested in the glowing stones. They brought Xiao Xian into the house and sat on the stone bench in the yard. There were no wooden benches. They were too fragile for the black bears. I'm Mao Da. Since the leader isn't here, I'm in charge of all the trade in Amba City. What good stuff did you bring this time? Do you have the glowing stones? Mao Da rubbed his hands and asked expectantly. We didn't bring many glowing stones. It's been dangerous in the river for half a year. It's not easy to cross, Xiao Xian said half-truthfully. The river in the hunting area hadn't dried up yet. Although there were fewer crocodiles now, there were still some. If they wanted to dig for more stones, they had to wait until the river dried up. However, Xiao Xian had made a few more water sun stones before he came. Rare things were valuable. It was best not to bring too many of these things out at once. When he heard about the glowing stones, Mao Da's eyes crinkled in a smile. He clapped his hands hard. Good. Where are they? We didn't bring them into the city, Xiao Xian said. It was not that they were afraid of trouble. It was just that there were too many things in the team. If they really fought with the people of Amba City, they would destroy a lot of things. The people in the team were reluctant. Why waste their own things for those people from Amba City? Thinking about what happened in Amba City last year, Mao Da understood. What you did was right. A few days ago, I went to the trading area and saw Onping and his men wandering around. By the way, do you still remember Onping? The one who gave you the broken cauldron? Yes, I remember. Xiao Xian heard Mao Da's words and knew that there were many stories he didn't know. The broken cauldron that Onping pushed out last year seemed to have some history. It failed for some reason, but to the aristocrats of Amba City, it was not a gift. Too bad that idiot Onping pushed it out in front of everyone. When he went back, he had one of his arms chopped off. He's holding the grudge against you. So when you enter the city, be careful. Don't run into him. Mao Da told Xiao Xian about what happened in Amba City. Wasn't it Yen who made the decision to give out the cauldron? Xiao Xian was confused. Mao Da's mouth twitched. He said with disdain, it's enough to have a useless scapegoat. But you guys are good. You made Yen suffer. I heard that only a few of the people Yen sent out came back. After understanding the situation in Amba City, Mao Da led his men and left the city with Xiao Xian. They went to a forest not far from the city. Mao Da and his men came and went all day. The guards of Amba City were used to it. So when they saw Mao Da and his men leave, they didn't think much of it. They didn't know Xiao Xian anyway. Not long after they left Amba City, Mao Da saw Yanjiao's Taihe team. Because he often dealt with the leaders of the trading teams with Black Bear, he knew Duo Kong and the others. After checking the goods, Mao Da negotiated the price with the leaders of the two teams. Whether it was food or metal or something else, they made the deal on the spot. Since they didn't bring enough, Mao Da sent his men back to the city to bring more. Mao Da had high hopes for the goods. Duo Kong and the others had no objections to Mao Da's price. Both sides were satisfied. So the deal didn't take long. Compared to the past where they had to stay in the trading area for a few days after entering the city, having to guard against sneak attacks and having to pay for the venue fee, this was already very good. It was the Taihe people's first time encountering such a good deal. Although they had to admit that it was all thanks to Yanjiao, they were still happy. Since the deal is done, let's find a place to rest for 2 days before going back. Whoever wants to trade can come with us. We don't all need to enter the city, it's too big of a target, the Taihe people discussed with Duo Kong. That works too. Duo Kong looked at Xiao Xian and asked, when do you plan to leave? Send more people to follow you. Duo Kong had to lead the team himself so he couldn't leave but the others could. I plan to go with the Black Bear team. They're going to the royal city the day after tomorrow too, Xiao Xian said. He had already mentioned it to Mao Da on the way here and Mao Da had agreed. However, if he went with the team, he couldn't bring too many people with him or the team wouldn't let him. Then we won't bring too many people. Only Guang Yi will go with you. It's good to have someone to take care of you. Although Guang Yi can't recognize people, he has experience. Guang Yi was very sensitive to danger. With Guang Yi with him, Duo Kong felt more assured. Xiao Xian thought about it and nodded. That works too. 2 days later. Duo Kong led the trading team back to the tribe with the Taiha people while Xiao Xian and Guang Yi went to the place they agreed to meet with Mao Da. They waited there for Mao Da's people to come out. Not long after, a team of about 100 people came out of the city. Everyone in the team was very muscular and stood out when they stood together with the others. Moreover, these 100 or so people were all carrying large packages wrapped in many layers of linen or carrying large wooden boxes. There were other people around who were tempted after seeing the goods, but once they knew that it was the Black Bear's caravan, they gave up. These people were not to be trifled with. You're going to carry these things to the royal city just like that? Xiao Xian looked at Mao Da's large bag and asked. Mao Da only smiled and let Xiao Xian and Guang Yi follow. Guang Yi followed quietly. He couldn't tell who was who. Mao Da's team looked the same to him. There was no difference but their aura was slightly different. Guang Yi tried to identify them based on their aura. After leaving Amba City and walking for less than half an hour, the team arrived at the foot of a mountain. The mountain wasn't high or steep. There were obvious signs of human modification. There were roads and buildings near the peak. Mao Da took out a horn made from a beast's horn and blew it. Woo! Not long after the horn sounded, Xiao Xian sensed something coming down from the mountain. He looked up and saw several large figures running down the mountain. Beside these large figures were other figures running quickly. Those are bears? Xiao Xian gasped. That's right. Mao Da's eyes were gleaming with pride. Owning such large beasts and using them as transportation was not something a normal merchant team could do. Even if other merchant teams had giant beasts, they were mostly herbivores that didn't have much attack power. Unlike them, they had giant bears. You're wearing bear skins and you're using giant bears as transportation. Won't they get angry? Xiao Xian asked curiously. Mao Da and the people around him all looked at Xiao Xian with a "you're ignorant" look. On the contrary, they're closer to us when we wear bear skins. Plus, the better the quality of our skins, the more obedient they are. As they spoke, the giant beasts running down the mountain arrived. There were a total of 7 giant bears. If each of them stood up with their forelimbs raised, they would be more than 10 meters tall. Their fur was dark brown. They were probably well taken care of. The fur on their bodies was glossy. When they ran under the sun, they could see the light flashing on their bodies. After the 7 giant bears came down, they were about to stop, but they suddenly smelled the scent of strangers. These scents made them feel very uneasy. One of the giant bears roared and sped up again, running towards Xiao Xian. Its fat paws stepped on the ground, causing the people standing nearby to feel the vibrations. Mao Da frowned. Spread out. They weren't carrying anything so there was no need to drag them. It would be better to let them go crazy. Mao Da turned and saw Xiao Xian still standing there. He shouted, "Move! Do you want to die?" The giant bears were already there. The vibrations caused by their paws on the ground could be felt just by looking at them. The angry roar caused the leaves on the surrounding trees to tremble. Xiao Xian looked at the giant bear that was almost in front of him. He lifted his foot and stomped down. Boom! With this stomp, the ground beneath his feet shook violently. A tyrannical force erupted from under his feet, as if an even larger beast had stomped on the ground, as if it wanted to crush everything here into smithereens. The tremors spread from the ground to the ground, and then rushed up from the ground. The surrounding stones on the ground suddenly shook, and fine dust rose like smoke. Countless cracks broke open and extended outwards. With this stomp, Xiao Xian's totemic power increased instantly. However, he retracted it the moment he stomped down. Many people hadn't even seen the totemic patterns on his body before they realized that they had faded away. It was as if they were seeing things. Whoosh, the giant bear stopped 5 meters away from Xiao Xian. Because of the sudden stop, it dug up chunks of hard soil. Under the giant bear's feet, there were even more chunks of soil that had been split apart. They were all caused by the cracks in the ground. Xiao Xian stood there, watching the giant bear in front of him quietly. As for the originally aggressive giant bear, after it paused, the fur around its nose trembled. It turned its head and roared in another direction, as if it had encountered an awkward situation in a conversation and suddenly changed the topic. It was a little stiff and turned away embarrassedly. Mauda and the rest were silent. The words "Do you want to die?" were still echoing in the air. Guang Yi broke off a thin branch and picked his teeth. These were just bears raised by humans. What was there to show off? I've killed so many bears that were bigger than these. Chapter 431. The black bears carried the goods onto the giant bear's back. As they carried the goods, some of them stole quick glances at Xiao Xian, then whispered to their companions. "Who's that kid? I don't know. He doesn't look like anything special. Who knew he was so strong? That stomp, TSK. Mauda said the kid will be coming with us to the royal city. We'll ask him on the way." On the other side, Mauda was embarrassed. No matter how thick-skinned he was, he couldn't help but blush. He had bragged too much before. Now that he thought about it, the flaming horns were all experienced hunters. They lived deep in the mountains and forests and had seen countless giant beasts. These bears might not even be worthy of their attention. Plus, these giant bears were trained to carry goods, not to fight. Even if they had bad tempers, they were not as ferocious as the other fearsome beasts that lived in the forest. The 7 bears laid on the ground, letting the caravans move the goods up. Some even yawned lazily, stretching out their paws to rub their ears. They did not look ferocious at all. "All right, we're done moving the goods. We can go now," someone said to Mauda. Mauda nodded. "Are the people in front coming?" "Not yet." "Oh, they're here." Xiao Xian heard their conversation and looked in one direction. 2 figures sprinted over from afar, stopping in front of Mauda. "We've cleared the ones in front," a big man said in a low, muffled voice. "Leader Mauda, we can go now." "Leader Jean is waiting in front," the other man said. Mauda waved his hand and shouted, "Let's go." Roar, the bear in front shook its fur and roared. It was one of the more experienced bears in the caravan. When they went down the mountain, it sensed Xiao Xian and Guang Yi's auras and felt danger, but it did not attack impulsively. Compared to the other bears, it was calmer. Mauda let it be the lead bear. That way, it could take the lead and sometimes control the situation. Xiao Xian and Guang Yi quickly followed. In addition to the 7 giant bears carrying a lot of goods, there were also several large wooden carts with 2 rollers. The rollers were round wheels made from the disc-shaped hard bones of some giant beasts. They were said to be extremely hard and were traded from the tribesmen. Furthermore, the wooden cart was not entirely made of wood. Some of the joints were made of metal, and under the wooden boards, there was a layer of beast armor. This way, the cart would not fall apart easily. 200 people were walking on the mountain path. The mountain path was not a path that was deliberately paved. After walking for a long time, it would become a path. Because of the frequent human activities, the frequency of felling was also higher. Therefore, the trees that grew here were not as big as the ones in the forest. There were no towering ancient trees that 20 or 30 people couldn't wrap their arms around. There were branches on both sides of the path that were cut down in the past. There were also signs of new branches being cut down. After all, even if the bears were on all fours, their backs were still 4 to 5 meters tall. With the goods tied up, they were even taller. Therefore, the branches on the path became an obstacle. Xiao Xian understood from his conversation with the caravan that a few days before the caravan set off, there would be a caravan clearing the path. They would clear the branches, large rocks on the ground, as well as all kinds of people and traps. This would allow the caravan to move forward smoothly and save time. When they passed by some places, Xiao Xian smelled blood. It was not beast blood, but human blood. After hunting for a long time, they could tell the difference between human and beast blood. A few young bears in the caravan were agitated or excited by the smell of blood. They growled a few times and their steps were messed up. It was only after the leading bear growled that the other bears calmed down. After walking for half a day, the caravan met a caravan of almost 100 people waiting there. These were the people who had cleared the path first. The leader was Maoda's brother, Mao Jin. He looked very similar to Maoda. When the caravan arrived, he was sitting on a rock by the road, using grass to wipe his blood-stained weapon. Maoda only glanced at the people waiting there. He had an idea of what obstacles Mao Jin and the rest might encounter. He didn't ask much. After the caravan met up with Mao Jin's people, they rested for a while. Then the 400-strong caravan set off again. A caravan like this was already quite large. Moreover, with the obvious symbol of the 7 bears, those who didn't have the ability would target this caravan. Therefore, not many people were robbed at the beginning. Only the brainless and greedy ones came out to die. When they were resting at night, Mao Jin chewed on meat as he asked Xiao Xian, "What are you going to do in the royal city?" "To find someone," Xiao Xian said. "Who are you looking for? Do you need our help? If you need help, don't hold it in. Just tell us and we'll help. We won't ask for much. What do you think?" Mao Jin wiped the oil from his mouth. "Just one of those glowing stones you have. You see, you've never been to the royal city before, so you don't know much about it. We've been there a lot, so we're familiar with it. It'll save us a lot of trouble." Mao Jin looked like a rough person, but he was smart like the rest of the traders. He wasn't the kind of person who only grew taller but didn't grow smarter. Now, in order to persuade Xiao Xian, he analyzed the pros and cons. Guang Yi didn't recognize Mao Jin and thought it was Maoda. However, that didn't bother him. He agreed. Since they didn't know much about the royal city and the black bears were trustworthy, it wasn't a bad idea to ask them for help. However, it was Xiao Xian who made the decision. Guang Yi didn't say anything. No matter how Mao Jin winked at him, Guang Yi didn't say anything. Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, "Since you're familiar with the royal city, I'd like to ask you about someone." Mao Jin knew there was hope and quickly said, "Go ahead." Even Maoda came over to sit. "Do you know Ji-ju?" Xiao Xian asked. Maoda and his brother's expressions turned serious at the mention of Ji. Ji from the 6 tribes? That's right. Maoda and his brother looked at each other, hesitating. People with the surname Wang could be involved in a lot of things. However, if it was a good thing, it could also be a great opportunity. Maoda rubbed his large palms and thought for a moment. "If you're talking about Golden Grain Ji-ju, we've heard a little about him. We just haven't met him in person." Golden Grain Ji-ju? Xiao Xian was surprised. That old man had a nickname? Maoda nodded. "I heard that most of the grains in Ji-ju's fields are golden. He's liked by the nobles and tribesmen. His grains are better than others. That's why they call him Golden Grain. This nickname has been with him since he was young. Ji-ju has a high status in the royal city. However, we haven't heard much about him this year." Mao Jin said, "Now that I think about it, that's true. We used to hear about Ji-ju every year. However, from last year until now, every time we go to the royal city, we haven't heard anything about him." I heard that Ji found something good again. Mauda stroked his chin, his eyes shining. Then, looking at Xiao Xian, Mauda suggested, how about this? We'll help you ask around when we reach the royal city. Thank you in advance, Xiao Xian said. They left Amba City and walked for another 9 days. We're almost there. The area in front belongs to the royal city. Mauda pointed ahead and said to Xiao Xian. As far as the eye could see, there were no tall city walls or buildings. Instead, there were fields of different colors and some low houses. Those belong to the nobles. The people living in the houses are their slaves, Mauda explained to Xiao Xian and led the team to a main road. If they didn't take this path, they would be treated as intruders with ulterior motives and killed. This was because, other than this road, the other places were all the slave masters' fiefs outside the city. It was their private territory. There wasn't a single blade of grass on the 20-meter-wide dirt road. Probably because of the dense traffic, the dirt on the ground was rolled over tightly. The tracks of various wheels were also very faint. There were also more people walking around. Large and small groups of people stepped onto the main road one after another. On both sides of the road, there were groups of people wearing leather armor guarding the road. The weapons in the hands of these guards were all metal weapons. Their faces were solemn, and their eyes were like knives sweeping across the passing groups. It was as if they would mercilessly kill with their spears if they found anything wrong. Some people trembled under such a situation and almost fell down as they walked. The Black Bear caravan was rather conspicuous here. The people in front quickly made way. The guards on the side of the road knew who the bears were. One of them even chatted with Mauda. When he received 2 furs from Mauda, he smiled so widely his eyes narrowed. The quality of the furs from the Black Bear caravan had always been better. The leader of the guards even helped them clear the path, allowing the slow caravans to move out of the way. Everyone was used to this. No one thought it was unreasonable. Even if they didn't like it, they could only hold it in. Even Guang Yi, who was here for the first time, didn't think there was anything wrong with it. This was how the world worked. The team continued forward. Xiao Xian thought they would reach the royal city soon. Unexpectedly, they walked for a long time before they saw the city walls. If this was Amba City, the bears wouldn't be allowed to enter. But the royal city did. This was power. They weren't afraid of the bears causing trouble in the royal city. They had absolute confidence in dealing with them. The royal city's city walls were made of huge rocks. Each rock was 4 to 5 meters long, 2 to 3 meters wide, and more than a meter thick. Xiao Xian could also see that most of the bricks were intermediate grade. In some places, like the area near the city gates, there were even a few pieces that were close to advanced grade. Using such good stone to make a city wall was extravagant. The sky was getting dark. Mauda brought the team to the Black Bear's base in the royal city. He ordered people to unload the goods and bring the 7 bears to the animal pen. He then brought Xiao Xian and Guang Yi to meet the leader, Black Bear. It was better for Black Bear to bring them to Jeju. Chapter 432. After not seeing him for a year, Black Bear still remembered Xiao Xian. Plus, Mauda had already sent someone into the city ahead of them to report the situation to Black Bear. Long time no see, Xiao Xian bro. Black Bear strode over and patted Xiao Xian's shoulder with his fan-like palm. This was their tribe's etiquette, a way to express enthusiasm and welcome. If it was a normal person, their bones would have been crushed under such strength. Even if they could withstand it, they would be trembling. Xiao Xian's expression did not change as he returned the greeting. Black Bear's face froze after being slapped by Xiao Xian, but he recovered quickly. However, he did not show any more warmth. He brought Xiao Xian and Guang Yi into the house and got someone to prepare rooms for them. Their group had many interactions with people, so they had their own rooms. Mauda told Black Bear about Xiao Xian's purpose in coming to the royal city. "You're looking for Jeju?" Black Bear thought for a while and said, Jeju of the Golden Valley hasn't appeared in King City for a long time. However, according to what I know, Jeju of the Golden Valley seems to be planting something good again and has spent a lot of effort. Since last year, he has been staying in his own farm outside the city. Not many people have seen him. Xiao Xian, it might be difficult for you to find Jeju. I have to try, Xiao Xian said. These days on the road, he had learned a lot about Jeju from Mauda and Mauda. He only knew that Jeju was related to the royal city and had a high status. Now, it seemed like he had underestimated the old man. However, when he thought about the 1,000-grain gold, he would not change his plan to find Jeju. Seeing that Xiao Xian had made up his mind, Black Bear stopped trying to persuade him. Like the Mauda brothers, he thought that if Xiao Xian could really connect with Jeju of the Golden Valley, they could also benefit from it. Jeju of the Golden Valley was not easy to get. After thinking for a while, Black Bear said, "How about this? I have nothing to do tomorrow. I'll take you to Old Ji's manor outside the city to try your luck and see if you can meet him. Thank you in advance." "Haha, you're too polite. If I can really see Jeju, I'll have to thank you." Black Bear ordered people to prepare food and called someone to inquire about Jeju's recent movements. The next day, Black Bear brought Xiao Xian and Guang Yi out of the city. A mammoth that was 6 to 7 meters tall was walking slowly in the city on its pillar-like legs. This mammoth was being led by other caravans, and it was carrying goods on its back. The mammoth's legs made loud noises as it stepped on the ground, causing the dust on the ground to rise. When it passed by Xiao Xian and Guang Yi, it kicked up a cloud of dust. Giant beasts like this were not rare in the city. The people of the royal city did not think it was rare and did not pay it much attention. Although the royal city allowed giant beasts to enter, it did not mean they were allowed to roam freely. Once they entered the city, they were all under the control of their own caravans and nested in their own camps. Different caravans came from different tribes. Here, other than the caravans of various sizes, there were also people in more exquisite clothing sitting on beast carriages. This was a privilege only the nobles had. Others were not allowed to ride beast carriages in the city. Even the giant beasts used by the caravans to transport goods could not sit on them. This was the rule of the royal city. Because it was Xiao Xian's first time in the royal city, it was already late when they entered the city yesterday. Mauda did not speak much to Xiao Xian either. Now, Black Bear gave Xiao Xian and Guang Yi a brief summary of the royal city's situation. Xiao Xian listened to Black Bear's tone. Although there were many rules here, a leader of a caravan like Black Bear was not afraid of the nobles. He did not think he was lower than them. When he talked about the nobles in the city, Black Bear's tone was filled with obvious disdain. The royal city was very lively. The sounds of people and the roars of beasts mixed together in the wide streets. There was the sound of copper coins clinking against each other. In the royal city, the currency was copper coins. They were shaped like narrow golden leaves, half the size of a pinky finger. They looked very similar to the leaves of the 1,000-grain gold and were also known as golden leaves. Without looking around the city, Black Bear led Xiao Xian and Guang Yi out of the city. They went through a 10-meter-wide dirt path to the left of the city gate. Jeju's farm is in that direction. I've been there with the previous leader before. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet Jeju. As they walked, Black Bear told Xiao Xian about his past. At that time, the name of the golden grains was already known by many tribes. Even the tribes further away had heard of Jeju. Every year, many tribes would come to the royal city out of admiration. Because the golden grains produced by Jeju could no longer be found in the royal city, many people went to Jeju's farm to stop him. Who knew that they would all be stopped outside? They couldn't even enter. Black Bear said so much so that Xiao Xian was mentally prepared. If he did not meet the Jeju people, he did not need to be discouraged. Everyone was like that. According to Black Bear, the name of Jeju was very useful. Even if it was just a weed from Jeju's farm, people would be willing to pay a high price for it. Far away from the royal city, there were also people who played with piracy. They claimed that they were produced from the golden grains outside the royal city. They sold it at a high price and many people went to trade. But in reality, the things from Jeju's farm were always in short supply. Even if you traveled thousands of miles to the royal city, you might not be able to buy it. Even if you went to the golden grains farm to beg, you might not be able to get it. Along the way, Black Bear also told Xiao Xian about the places they passed, which land belonged to which family, and how many slaves there were. Generally speaking, the bigger the land, the more slaves there were, and the higher the status of the slave owner in the royal city. Therefore, there was no need to look at the people. Just by looking at the land, one could get a general impression. There were some tall fences around the land, blocking people who wanted to enter. As for the inside of the fences, through the gaps of the fences, one could vaguely see large and small wooden houses scattered around the land. Those were the slaves who took care of the land. These are all owned by some idle nobles and are passed down from generation to generation. If they are capable, they will be able to obtain more land. If they are not capable and commit crimes, then their land will be taken back. Oh, that piece of land over there. When I came over 2 years ago, I heard that the slave owner of that piece of land had committed a crime and was taken back. Now, the owner of that piece of land has changed. As they were talking, the three of them suddenly heard the sound of wheels approaching from afar. Get out of the way! Get out of the way! Don't block the way! Someone shouted. Xiao Xian and the other two originally wanted to move out of the way, but when they heard this, they stopped and turned to look. It was a carriage pulled by 2 horses. The 2 horses pulling the carriage were 3 meters tall, with brown fur and large horns on their heads. The horses' hooves were like basins. When they stepped on the ground, they could hear the sound of the stones on the ground being crushed. The surroundings of the carriage were covered with fine silk cloth, and there were even patterns drawn on the cloth. Xiao Xian recognized the pattern. It was the tribal pattern of the royal Ji family, which was also the current Ji clan pattern. When the people of the royal city saw such a pattern, most of them would voluntarily move out of the way, but there were some who would not. Black Bear did not want to cause trouble and was willing to move out of the way. However, when he was yelled at to get out of the way, he was not happy. Although the road was not smooth and the carriage was not going fast, the horses' hooves showed no signs of slowing down. They stomped on the ground and charged forward. Beside the carriage were 8 bodyguards. Those bodyguards recognized Black Bear, and when they saw this situation, they couldn't help but curse in their hearts, "This is bad." Seeing that the carriage was getting closer and closer, and Xiao Xian and the other 2 did not move out of the way, the driver's eyes flashed with a haze.
He waved his long whip, urging the horse pulling the carriage to directly crash into them. When the guards saw this, they cursed the coachman 1,000 times in their hearts. However, it was too late to stop him. These 2 horses were not new horses that had just pulled the carriage. They had encountered such situations many times, so after being whipped, their hooves stomped even harder. The horses' heads drooped, and the sharp horns on their heads pointed forward. Black Bear snorted mockingly. Instead of retreating, he took a big step towards the carriage and pulled out the large copper knife on his back that was more than 2 palms wide and more than a meter long. The thick and broad copper blade radiated an undisguised aggressive aura, with wild wildness and biting cold murderous intent. Black Bear held the large copper knife. With a swing of his arm, the knife drew a cold light in the air, like the sharp claws of a ferocious beast. Bang! The ground in front of the Black Bear was easily torn open, leaving a half-meter wide hole. The violent air spread out in all directions along with the dust. The flying pieces of hard earth hit the 2 horses in front of it like raindrops and turned into smoke with a bang. Even if they were just chunks of earth, when their hardness, speed, volume, and quantity reached a certain level, their attack power could not be underestimated. The 2 horses pulling the carriage raised their front legs and neighed under the attack of the chunks of earth. They probably felt the irresistible killing intent from Black Bear and stopped decisively. The horse came to an abrupt stop, and the people sitting in the carriage almost fell out. The curtain of the carriage between Xiao Xian and the others moved. A delicate voice came from inside. What happened? Following this question, the curtain was pulled open and a young woman wearing a pure white fur jumped out of the carriage. Probably because of the chaos just now, her hair was a bit messy. The person who came out with a cold face glanced at Xiao Xian and the others and said sternly, "How dare you?" Black Bear blew the dust off his knife. Hearing this, he was so angry that he laughed. He never took the initiative to offend people, but the premise was that the other party did not take the initiative to provoke him. As the leader of the Black Bear caravan and the leader of the tribe, he was yelled at to get lost. If he backed down now, who would respect the Black Bear caravan in the future? Respect is mutual. If you don't respect me, why should I respect you? The 6 royal families. Not even the royal families. A slip of the tongue. A slip of the tongue is also not allowed. How dare you? I've always been very bold. Black Bear did not have the slightest intention of backing down. He still stood there steadily. The guards around the young woman wanted to say something several times, but there was no place for them to interrupt.
Besides, according to their master's temperament, she would not listen even if they said something. Chapter 433. The young woman in the white coat wanted to say something, but a voice came from not far away, "Wait." Another carriage came from behind. However, it was not pulled by horses, but by a cow. In terms of size, it was even bigger than the horse in front. Although it was pulled by a cow, the curtains on the carriage were the same as the one in front. Whether it was the material or the workmanship, they were all very fine. The ox cart slowly came to a stop. Because the carriage in front was blocking the road, the big yellow ox that was pulling it snorted and pushed the carriage to the side with its horns. The 2 horses seemed to be old rivals of the cow. When they saw each other, their eyes turned red and the cow's horns collided with the horses. The cow was fighting 1 against 2 but was not at a disadvantage. This was probably the benefit of having 2 horns. At this time, 2 young people jumped down from the carriage. It was a man and a woman. They looked similar but the man was slightly older. "Ji Yan, Ji Wan. You dare to hit my carriage?" The woman in the white coat shouted angrily when she saw them. Unfortunately, the 2 did not even look at her. Instead, they walked quickly towards Black Bear. "So it's Black Bear, Baimi. Boss Black, sorry for offending you just now. I have something important to do today so I can't say in detail. If it's inconvenient, I'll definitely come tomorrow to apologize," the young man said. He was the one who shouted, "Wait. Ji Yan." Black Bear looked at the man in front of him. He knew this person and knew this was the end of the matter. He could not continue fighting, so he put his sword away and carried it on his back. What this person meant by paying a visit to make amends was to send someone over with an apology gift. The woman in the white coat realized that the people in front of her were not easy to deal with. She knew she had made a mistake, so she did not say anything, implying that Ji Yan wanted to apologize. Black Bear looked at the 3 from the Ji family and couldn't be bothered to argue. Perhaps Ji Ju would say a few more words to him for the sake of the 3 of them. That old man Ji Ju had a bad temper. Even if he didn't know what kind of attitude he would have towards his 3 grandchildren. Also, he did not know if Ji Yan's important matter had anything to do with Ji Ju. Thinking of this, Black Bear did not plan to stop them. His fierce face broke into a smile. "You're going to Golden Grain, Master Ji Ju? It just so happens that we are also going to pay him a visit." Ji Yan raised an eyebrow, glancing at Xiao Xian and Guang Yi before looking at He Xiong. To him, the other 2 were just secondary. He Xiong was the most important one. "Since we're going the same way, why don't the 3 of you travel with us? There's room in the carriage, said Ji Yan. Here, apart from the nobles, no one else was allowed to ride. However, if they were invited, they were allowed to ride. Ji Yan's words were exactly what Black Bear wanted. He laughed and said, "All right, then I won't hold back." Xiao Xian saw that He Xiong did not mind at all and followed him into the car. Guang Yi followed closely behind. Ji Jing was stunned when she saw the three people get on Ji Yan and Ji Wan's carriage. When she regained her senses, she was infuriated. They were trying to use her incident to get more allies. Those two cunning people. How cunning! The road was only so wide and the horses and oxen pulling it were huge. When the carriage passed by, it was so crowded that it almost fell into the grass ditch. The carriage was huge, about 3 meters wide and 7 to 8 meters long. There was a main seat and a guest seat. Xiao Xian and the other two sat in the guest seat. "Why are you here today, Boss He?" asked Ji Yan. "Me? No, I'm just here to accompany the guests," said Black Bear. Accompany the guests? The leader of the Black Bears was only here to accompany the guests. Who was he accompanying? Ji Yan and Ji Wan looked at Xiao Xian and Guang Yi again. However, Xiao Xian and Guang Yi were not wearing anything special. They were obviously from a barbaric tribe and did not have any symbols they were familiar with. And these two are? Ji Yan looked at Xiao Xian and Guang Yi. Xiao Xian smiled and introduced himself, "Xiao Xian from Yanjiao." "Guang Yi from Yanjiao," said Guang Yi. Xiao Xian remembered Ji Ju saying that many people did not remember the Yanjiao tribe anymore. Only the older ones had some impression. Hence, when Xiao Xian introduced himself, he paid attention to Ji Yan and Ji Wan's expressions. He noticed the confusion in their eyes. It was not obvious, but Xiao Xian knew that they really did not know about the Yanjiao tribe. "I think so," Ji Yan thought hard and said, "Your tribe should be very far from the royal city, right?" Some distance," said Xiao Xian. Ji Yan asked a few more questions. When he found out that Xiao Xian came all the way here to learn from Ji Ju, his curiosity was gone and he lost interest in asking more questions. Were there not many people who came here every year to learn? The queue could stretch from the royal city all the way to the village. Ji Wan looked at Xiao Xian a few times. About half an hour later, the ox cart stopped. After alighting, Xiao Xian saw a huge mansion. Looking around, it was surrounded by tall fences and fields. There were teams of guards patrolling nearby. Judging by their aura, they did not lose to the guards at the royal city's gates. Not far from the mansion was a large stone tablet with the Ji family's emblem on it. The ox cart had just stopped when the carriage behind arrived. However, there was no quarrel between the two parties. Everyone was quiet, even the ox horses pulling the carriages were unusually quiet. Ji Yan and the other two went in first. After all, they were from the Ji family, so the guards at the gate did not stop them. However, Xiao Xian and the other two were stopped. They could not even use the name Black Bear. Ji Yan wanted to curry favor with Black Bear, but he could not. In this place, they could not make the decision. There was only one owner, and that was Ji Ju. Ji Yan gave Black Bear an apologetic look and went in with Ji Jing and Ji Wan. The guards in front of the mansion stood there like debtors, their sharp eyes scanning Xiao Xian and the other two. Even Black Bear did not receive any special treatment. However, Black Bear did not feel embarrassed this time. Instead, he asked Xiao Xian worriedly, "How is it? Do you have any other ideas?" It was impossible to force their way in. The risk was too great. Xiao Xian gestured for Black Bear to calm down. Then, he walked towards the entrance of the mansion. Under the sharp gazes of the guards, he took out a strange-shaped copper knife from his pouch and handed it over. "Please pass a message to Ji Ju. Say that an old friend is here to visit." The guards who stood there like door gods sneered when they heard the first half of the sentence. "Who the fuck is this? Does he have the right to pass a message to Jeju? However, when they heard the second half of the sentence, they realized that this person really did have the right to do so. If it was anyone else who said, "An old friend is here to visit," the guards would have sent them out. There were too many people who used this excuse. However, it was different with a token. When they saw the knife, the guards' gazes changed. They retracted their sharp gazes and sized them up curiously. One of the guards carefully examined the copper knife in Xiao Xian's hand. He immediately put away his arrogance and coldness and respectfully extended both hands to take the knife from Xiao Xian. "Please wait a moment." Then, the guard held the knife with both hands and ran through the door, disappearing in the blink of an eye. When he heard the guard say, "Please," Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian as if he had seen a two-headed beast. He opened his mouth and said, "You know Jeju?" "I know him. Didn't I tell you yesterday that I've seen Jeju before?" Xiao Xian said. Black Bear thought about it seriously. It seemed that he had mentioned it at dinner yesterday. However, he did not take it seriously at that time. He only thought that Jeju had seen him from afar a few times like him. "Xiao Xian, are you really here to ask Jeju about planting? There must be something else." Black Bear asked curiously. "To have Jeju's token, it must not be an ordinary person." "Yes." Xiao Xian nodded. "What is it?" Black Bear asked. He was really curious. If he did not ask, his heart would itch. "Debt collection." "Black Bear. I won't believe it even if you peel off my bear skin. Jeju owes a debt? Huh. On the other side, next to a piece of land. Jeju looked at the surrounding pieces of land with a bad expression. Around him, a dozen people bowed and listened to his orders. I said before that there are 3 rows here. Each row is an arm's length apart. An arm's length apart. What are you showing me? Are your arms as long as your legs? Reorganize. And this piece, is the chaff husk ready? It will be covered in 10 days. If it's not all covered by then, everyone in the field will die. You guys can get out and die too. Ha, and this piece of land, deep plow. Deep plow. You've been with me for so long, don't you know what deep plow is? If you don't, get out of the farm. Jeju scolded as he walked, his expression getting worse. The dozen people who bowed and listened to his orders did not dare to wipe their faces. They carefully answered Jeju's questions. If they made a mistake, they promised that they would fix it. They did not want to be chased out of the farm. It was so good here. There was food and rewards. People outside could not even get them if they wanted. Many people were envious. Even if they were the lowest class of slaves, many people were willing to come in. When he walked to the side of a piece of land, Jeju looked at the ground expressionlessly. Who buried the bones here? The dozen people around him screamed in their hearts. It's over, it's over. This is the prelude to a rage. They had been with Jeju for a long time and understood his temperament. If Jeju scolded, it meant that there was still a chance. What they were afraid of was that Jeju did not scold. At this time, someone would be unlucky. Everyone present would be implicated. One of them was pale. This piece of land was under his jurisdiction. Although nothing had been planted, they were preparing for planting. Burying the bones was one of the procedures. Jeju had sent people to find the animal bones that were buried underground. With these bones, the plants that were planted on top of the ground would grow well. But now, looking at Jeju's expression, something had gone wrong. Jeju's eyes were sharp. With one glance, he understood the situation. If he said there was a problem with the bones, then there must be a problem. This was the authority of the entire farm. The person in charge of this piece of land trembled and wiped the sweat from his forehead. He ordered someone to bring the person who buried the bones over. Soon, 2 slaves were brought in front. They were responsible for burying the animal bones. The person in charge of this piece of land stared at the two slaves as if dipped in poison. After seeing Ji-ju, the two slaves knew that their matter had been discovered. They were so frightened that they did not even have the courage to explain. They lay on the ground trembling. To be honest, although Ji-ju's temper was bad, compared to other slave masters who tortured and killed slaves, he was much better. As long as the land was planted well, the rewards would not be small. When Ji-ju was in a good mood, he was always generous to those who contributed. Even if they were slaves, he would not be stingy with his rewards. However, there were still people who were not satisfied. These two slaves were one of them. The animal bones that had been transported over had been replaced, and the original animal bones would definitely have been stolen by the two slaves to exchange for other benefits. It was impossible to say that the management of such a large farm was ironclad. Many people coveted the things here and had coveted the planting method of Ji-ju for a long time. It was possible that some people had taken advantage of the loopholes. For those who were good at planting, a piece of animal bone could reveal too much. Ji-ju's expression was frosty as he said coldly, "Drag them out." Immediately, guards came over to gag the two slaves and drag them away for interrogation. No matter the result, these two slaves would not live. Some people like to use people as fertilizer. In other slave owners' fields, they might use executed slaves as fertilizer, but not in Ji-ju's field. The servants all knew that in this man's field, he planted everything down to a bone, a stone, a handful of soil, and a bucket of dung. But it was also because of this that Ji Residence's produce had always been the best. The person in charge of this piece of land would not be able to keep his position and would definitely be removed. As for whether he would be able to recover, that would depend on his ability. Just as Ji-ju was in a bad mood, the steward of the farm hurried over. "Master, the young masters have arrived, I won't see them." Ji-ju waved his hand impatiently. "There are also a few people from the caravan, tell them to scram." Before the steward could finish, Ji-ju's answer was thrown at him. The steward had expected this. He had only mentioned it as a matter of business, as long as he fulfilled his responsibilities. As for the people from the caravan, they must have wanted to see the new treasures the master had planted. They were looking for a scolding. After taking a few steps back, one of the guards came over and said a few words before handing the saber in his hand to the manager. Seeing the knife, the steward's face flashed with surprise. Then, holding the knife, he quickly chased after Ji-ju. "Master, is there anything else?" "Someone's coming, I told them to scram." "But he handed over this knife." "Didn't you hear me tell them to scram?" "Wait. What knife?" Ji-ju snapped out of his rage and looked at the small copper knife in the steward's hands. His eyebrows rose as he picked it up and played with it familiarly between his fingers. "Who did you say came? Was it someone called Xiao Xian?" I don't know." The guard only said it was a young man who looked like a tribesman. "That's the kid. Bring him in." Chapter 434. Ji-ju's words stunned the steward, but he reacted quickly and left quickly. Knowing that Xiao Xian was here, Ji-ju was not in the mood to continue inspecting the fields. The more he looked, the more annoyed he got. He waved his hand and dismissed the stewards. The next time he came, if he found any mistakes, he would leave the position of steward empty. There were many people who wanted to get in anyway. Ji-ju did not want to say anything to those who were not capable. He waved his hand and dismissed the stewards. Ji-ju went to the nearest Qingmang Palace. This was one of the resting areas in the field. Sometimes, when Ji-ju was tired from inspecting the fields, he would go to the nearest room to rest. On the other side, Xiao Xian and the other two were waiting at the door. There were a few people who came because of the reputation, but they were all mercilessly blocked outside. Even if they presented beautiful gifts, the guards would not even look at them. The unwilling ones could only wander around, they did not have the guts to force their way in. Black Bear paced back and forth a few times outside, feeling very uneasy. He could not stay calm. In the past, he was always stopped here. It was rare to get a chance to steal from Jiju's fields in the royal city. This was a rare opportunity. Of course he was anxious. He looked at Xiao Xian, who was standing quietly at the side, and Guang Yi, who was silent. Black Bear did not understand. How could these two be so calm? Not long after, the sound of footsteps could be heard. The people waiting outside the door, whether they were circling around or thinking of a solution, all swept their gazes over and stared at the person coming out from inside. It was the guard who had just entered. However, after the guard came out, he returned to his original position and continued to be a gatekeeper. He did not say a word. Black Bear wanted to go forward and ask, but the guard didn't look at him, as if he didn't want to talk. Black Bear looked at Xiao Xian again. The token had been sent out, but there was no response. How could this kid not be worried? Just as he was about to ask Xiao Xian, Black Bear heard footsteps coming from inside. Although the footsteps were very light and people with low abilities would not be able to detect them, Black Bear was very alert and had strong hearing. Naturally, he could hear the footsteps. Creak, the gate with the two golden bull heads was opened again. This time, it wasn't a guard. The person who walked out was dressed differently from the guards. He wore a small green cloth hat and there were some green decorations on his clothes that looked like leaves. When they saw this person, the hearts of the people waiting outside tightened. Soon after, they became ecstatic. There were even some who recognized this person. Chief Steward! Someone exclaimed. The words, Chief Manager, caused the crowd outside to boil. They all swarmed forward, wanting to say a few more words to the Chief Manager of the Golden Grain Fields. Even if it was just one more word, it would be good to leave an impression. Who knows, they might be able to connect with him in the future. However, just as these people rushed over, they were stopped by the guards outside the door. When the head steward came out, there were also people following behind him. These people looked even more difficult to deal with than the guards at the door. Pairs of arms firmly blocked the people outside. There were also people who were slapped down as soon as they jumped up. How could a person who could be a guard here be trash? Among them, there was no one who was lower than an intermediate totemic warrior. The chief manager stood at the door. He was familiar with this situation, so his expression did not change. He looked around and finally stopped at Xiao Xian. Are you Xiao Xian? The chief manager asked. Xiao Xian raised his head. Yes, I am. The head of the house invites you in. The chief manager said with a smile. Although the senior manager's voice was not loud, everyone heard him clearly. In an instant, the noisy scene froze. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes widened in disbelief as they looked at Xiao Xian, who did not have much of a presence. This is my elder, Guang Yi. He's with me. Xiao Xian introduced Guang Yi. Black Bear was so happy his mouth almost split open. He hurried to Xiao Xian's side and introduced himself. I'm Black Bear Baimi. I'm with Xiao Xian this time. The chief manager only smiled and did not refuse. He led Xiao Xian and the other two into the field. Creak, the door closed again, blocking the people outside who were craning their necks to look around. After entering the field from the main entrance, they saw the main hall, the Golden Grain Hall. That was where they met with guests. In reality, most of the people who met here were not important figures of Jiju. The chief manager was in charge of the reception and Jiju did not appear. When Xiao Xian followed the chief manager into the Golden Grain Hall, he saw Ji Yan and the other two who had entered before them. Ji Yan and Ji Wan sat on one side while Ji Jing sat on the other. They were not far from each other, but there was a clear separation between the two. Originally, they wanted to meet Jiju to ask about the 1,000-grain gold. Others did not know what Jiju had been busy with for the past year, but the Ji family knew a little. According to past practice, this should be the time for a big harvest, but the news from the field was only about other grains. There was no news of the 1,000-grain gold that they wanted to know about. Before this, many people from the Ji family had come to ask, but the reply was always no. As the days passed, the best harvest season was over and there was still no news. The Ji family panicked. They sent people one after another, but they were all rejected. A rather powerful person in the Ji family once said that if anyone in the Ji family could get information from Ji Ju's field, they would be rewarded with an excellent piece of land. Hence, the Ji family went crazy. This time, Ji Yen and the other two wanted to come, but they were rejected like everyone else. They could not even enter the Golden Grain Hall. Those who knew the rules knew that the Golden Grain Hall was actually a barrier. If they could not pass through the hall, they would not have the chance to meet Ji Ju. Now, the three of them could only sit on the stools in the Golden Grain Hall and stare. When they heard that the chief steward was rushing to the main gate, they were curious about what happened. Now that the chief steward had brought Xiao Xian and the other two in, Ji Yen stopped drinking. Putting down the cup, Ji Yen stood up and strode over. "Black Bear, where are you going?" They did not look like they were going to stop. Were they going to pass through the Golden Grain Hall? It was Black Bear's first time in the field and he was too excited. His mouth was still open. When he heard Ji Yan's question, he answered, "I said, I'm here with someone." "Someone?" Ji Yan finally looked at Xiao Xian and Guang Yi seriously. When Black Bear said he was here with someone, he did not take it seriously. He thought it was just like the others. Now that he saw the chief steward leading the way for Xiao Xian, Ji Yan was filled with regret. If he had known this would happen, he would have asked more questions on the carriage. Maybe he could have used this kid to pass through the Golden Grain Hall. But it was too late for regrets. The chief steward still politely stopped the three of them and led Xiao Xian and the others through the Golden Grain Hall. There was a dirt path behind it that led into the distance. After Xiao Xian and the other two left, inside the Golden Grain Hall, Ji Yen sat there sulking. Who is that kid? How did he get to meet Granduncle? Sitting on the other side, Ji Jing snorted strangely. She was happy that Ji Yen and the others did not seize the opportunity. Since they did not get to meet Granduncle, she felt better. But Ji Wan, who was sitting next to Ji Yen, tugged at Ji Yan's sleeve. What is it? Ji Yen tilted his head and asked. That Xiao Xian has something strange on him. It's in that little bag he's carrying. Granduncle might want to meet him because of what's in the bag, Ji Wan said softly. Something strange? Ji Yen was about to ask when he saw Ji Jing perking up her ears. He quickly pulled Ji Wan to the resting room beside the hall and asked her in secret. Ji Jing, who was left in the hall, smashed her cup in anger. Ignoring Ji Yen and the other two's reactions, Xiao Xian followed the chief steward and walked along the dirt path behind the Golden Grain Hall. There were many fields on both sides with all kinds of grains. Black Bear's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. These were all golden leaves, golden leaves. It was said that every blade of grass in the golden grain fields was very valuable. How many golden leaves would there be for all this grass? How many weapons could he exchange for? The chief steward was only in charge of leading the way. He did not say a word to Black Bear's questions. If he wanted to know the answer, he had to ask the owner of the fields. Only Ji Ju had the right to answer. The chief steward led them all the way to the Qingmong Hall. The Qingmong Palace was much smaller than the Golden Grain Palace, but the furnishings inside were not as extravagant and dazzling. However, there was a sense of tranquility that calmed one's irritation. If one was tired, resting in such a place was also a form of enjoyment. When Xiao Xian arrived, Ji Ju had just finished a cup of tea. Seeing Xiao Xian enter, Ji Ju pointed at the rattan mat beside him. Sit. Your place is not bad. Xiao Xian took the tea from the chief steward. The water was green and had a refreshing sweet smell. He did not know what kind of grass it was boiled with. Ji Ju only grunted in response to Xiao Xian's praise. Then he said, Xiao Xian, do you still have the grains in your hands? I'll exchange them with this year's harvest. How about that? I'm not exchanging. Xiao Xian said. Ji Ju, who was about to say his bargaining chip, choked. He had been in the manor for a long time, and it had been a long time since anyone dared to reject him so directly. But thinking of how Xiao Xian had helped him before, Ji Ju suppressed his anger. He knew that Xiao Xian must have more grains. His eyes lit up and he continued to persuade, you see, it's useless for you to keep them, I'm not exchanging. We failed this year. We plan to continue next year. Xiao Xian said. How did you plant this year? Ji Ju's voice trembled. He could not bear it. We planted some on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain. I even scattered some seeds in my backyard. Xiao Xian described the situation when he first started planting the 1,000-grain gold. Not long after he started, Ji Ju slammed his hand on the table beside him. Nonsense. The sudden roar frightened Black Bear so much that he spat out his tea. How can you do that? What nonsense! What a waste! What a waste! Ji Ju's face was full of anger. He blew his beard and glared. His heart ached for the wasted grains. As expected, when he first heard that Xiao Xian was Yanjiao, he should not have given them so many seeds. 1,000 grains. Chapter 435. No, listen to me. Xiao Xian gestured for Ji Ju to calm down. But Ji Ju couldn't calm down. The more he thought about it, the more his heart ached. Later, he brought people to the 1,000-grain gold to move the few stalks back from the mountain, but they couldn't. Their roots were too long and no one knew where they went. They couldn't even dig them up. They took the risk to break 2 stalks, but they withered not long after. He sent people to search again, but they couldn't find the 1,000-grain gold. The few stalks there didn't produce any more stalks. Perhaps there were only a few stalks of 1,000-grain gold left and the fruits were in his and Xiao Xian's hands. Xiao Xian, tell me, how many of this year's new grains do you want in exchange? Ji Ju asked, suppressing his frustration. Xiao Xian didn't reply. Black Bear guessed something from Xiao Xian and Ji Ju's conversation. He guessed that Xiao Xian and Ji Ju had found some strange grains. Xiao Xian brought some back but failed to plant them. Ji Ju wanted to use this year's new grains to exchange for last year's grains. To Black Bear, this was a win-win situation. When it came to planting, especially those strange grains, the Ji family had always been the best. Now that the Ji family had a golden grain Ji Ju, it meant that Ji Ju's grains were the best in the Ji family. Since Xiao Xian couldn't grow them well, wouldn't it be better to trade them for something else? The golden grain field's new grains were the envy of many. If they sold them, the Yanjiao tribe would get a lot of good weapons too. Black Bear wanted to persuade Xiao Xian to agree. He looked at Guang Yi, hoping that as an elder, he could persuade him. Unfortunately, Guang Yi kept frowning as if he had heard something that upset him. It was not directed at Xiao Xian but Ji Ju. Black Bear's heart jumped. How could he forget that Yanjiao people were never afraid of trouble? Even if the person in front of him was Ji Ju, they could do anything if they were unhappy. What to do, what to do? Black Bear's mind raced as he thought of all sorts of possible scenarios and thought of a solution to each one. Seeing Xiao Xian's silence, Ji Ju thought that Xiao Xian was weighing the pros and cons and was considering how much to say, so he decided to push harder. You guys aren't good at growing these. You'll just be wasting the grains in your hands. No way. As he spoke, Ji Ju asked the steward to bring over a large bag of grains. The bag was almost as tall as a person when placed on the ground. Opening the bag, the steward carefully scooped up a spoonful of it and placed it on the tray. He then placed the tray on the short table in front of Ji Ju. This is this year's new grain. Take a look, said Ji Ju. The unshelled grains were pushed onto the bronze tray, each grain glowing with a golden light. However, these were not the 1,000-grain gold. They were oval-shaped, not round like the 1,000-grain gold. The grains were only the size of a regular grain, not as big as the 1,000-grain gold. Black Bear rubbed his hands, wanting to grab a handful to take a look. However, he was only there to accompany the guest and could not move freely. He looked at Xiao Xian. Good grains like these, what a good deal. If Xiao Xian got more from this, he could trade with Xiao Xian again. Not only Black Bear, Jiju was also waiting for Xiao Xian to say a number and be done with it. However, after some thought, Xiao Xian did not answer. Instead, he asked, "How's the 1,000-grain gold growing on your side?" Jiju was unhappy that he did not get the answer he wanted. However, to make Xiao Xian give up, he said, "Not bad. 60% of the grains that were planted survived. For 1,000-grain gold, this kind of survival rate was already very high. Some rare grains had less than a tenth of the survival rate when planted, but in Jiju's hands, more than 60% could survive." Black Bear had some understanding of this. He nodded to himself, praising Jiju for his golden grains. Jiju thought that if Xiao Xian asked about the method of planting, he would never tell him. However, Xiao Xian continued, "What color are the 1,000-grain gold that you planted?" "When the 1,000-grain gold ripens, it will naturally turn gold," said Jiju, stroking his beard. "What about after it's shelled?" "Of course it's gold." Guang Yi's expression was strange. Xiao Xian raised an eyebrow. "So you haven't planted it yet? What's the rush?" Jiju was unhappy with Xiao Xian's attitude. "Even if you're in a rush, you won't succeed. Be patient, calm down, got it?" Guang Yi looked at Jiju even more strangely. "How tall is the 1,000-grain gold in your field?" asked Xiao Xian. "It's already over the waist. Why are you asking so many questions? I only have one thing to say. Are you trading or not? If you're willing, how many grains do you want? Just say it." Jiju was impatient. He had spent too much time dealing with things here. The most important thing was the 1,000-grain gold. Seeing that Jiju did not want to say more, Xiao Xian did not stop. Instead, he continued, "At that time, the seedlings were growing very well in the fields at the foot of the mountain. They looked different every day." Jiju huffed. "Then they all died?" At this moment, he deeply felt that bringing Xiao Xian in was not a wise decision. This kid was too good at talking nonsense. Couldn't he just name a price? No one expected that when the time came, the seedlings on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain all died. However, I realized that the seeds I had forgotten in the backyard were still alive. They just grew much slower." Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Jiju went from mockery to shock and then to understanding. They grew slowly. They didn't meet tribulation, so they were fine. I believe that when they grew, they would be killed by tribulation just like the previous ones. This. Xiao Xian twirled the small copper cup in his hand. They actually survived. Jiju paused. Survived? Yes. Not only did they survive, but they grew taller and stronger. They were even taller than my head. However, fewer and fewer survived. Jiju lowered his eyes. Continue. Then they began to ear. The grains they produced were this big. Xiao Xian curled his thumb and index finger into a grape-sized circle. The steward standing at the side could not help but sneer. He looked at Jiju again. This family head was probably going to flip out again. As expected, after Xiao Xian gestured, Jiju looked up. His old eyes flashed fiercely as he stared straight at Xiao Xian. The invisible pressure was like a tall wall. "You lied to me." You can joke with Jiju in other ways, but don't do it when you're talking about farming. He'll get angry. "Such big grains? You think I'd believe you?" Ji was so angry his face turned green. He had wanted to have a good talk with this kid, but this kid dared to bluff him. Black Bear was terrified. It was rare for the leader of the caravan to be like this. Did offending Ji mean that the Black Bears would never be able to get any golden grains in the future? He had wanted to bring some back for the children in the tribe. He had heard that these golden grains were very good for humans, but now it seemed that there was no hope. Xiao Xian ignored Jiju's anger and did not respond to Black Bear's glances. Instead, he took out the animal skin bag hanging from his waist and opened it. Jiju, who was about to flip out, froze as if he had been enchanted. His eyes were fixed on the bag Xiao Xian took out, his nostrils expanding and contracting rapidly. Xiao Xian took out a few grains from the bag and placed them on the tray on the table. The grape-sized golden grains rolled onto the tray and hit the golden grains with a thud. Just from the sound of it, one could tell that each grain was very heavy. The light from the window shone on the golden balls, making them shine even brighter. If it weren't for these big round balls, the golden grains on the plate would still be very conspicuous. However, when the golden round balls rolled into the plate, the original grains seemed to be reduced to the background and became much dimmer. In comparison, everything could be seen clearly. Black Bear was no longer in the mood to think of a solution. He looked at the golden balls Xiao Xian took out and his eyes widened. These were grains? Even the steward, who had been with them for many years, was shocked to see this. With his years of experience, he could tell whether a grain was good or bad, but he never thought that the grains from his family's farm would be reduced to a background. This is... Jiju's breathing quickened as he tried to identify the smell in the air. His voice trembled and hoarse, but because he was too excited, his voice was sharp and piercing. This is the 1,000-grain gold that we grew. Our Yanjiao tribe grew it, Xiao Xian said seriously, emphasizing our Yanjiao tribe. Guang Yi was proud. So what if he was Jiju? How dare he look down on the Yanjiao people? What's wrong with our Yanjiao people? Why can't we grow anything good? I'll blind your dog eyes. Jiju didn't even notice Guang Yi's gaze. He couldn't see anything but the golden grains on the tray. He reached out and grabbed a few large round grains on the tray. He didn't even look at the small grains that were scattered outside. He picked up the large round grains and sniffed them carefully. Yes, this is the smell. It's the 1,000-grain gold. Bring me my knife. The head steward came back to his senses and left in a hurry. Soon, he came back with a plate. The plate was covered with a piece of soft leather. On the leather, there were a few strange-looking knives. The handles were very long, but the blades were very small. Jiju picked up a small knife and held a few large round pellets in his other hand. Tch, with a light sound, the shell of one of the round balls in his palm was cut open. Along with the tip of the knife, a complete husked grain was exposed. Why is it this color? Jiju was shocked. In Jiju's hand, the purplish gold grains were placed next to the golden grains. It looked even stranger. That's why I wanted to ask you. I was just asking you what color it was, Xiao Xian said. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Jiju looked at the purplish gold beads in his palm, his gaze unfocused then focused on the beads again. He closed his palm, grabbing all the beads in his palm and ran out like the wind. Then, he ran back and dragged Xiao Xian out again. Chapter 436. Xiao Xian was dragged out of the Qingmang Palace by Jiju. After a while, he saw Jiju stop and shouted, "Yellow Earth." Xiao Xian had heard Jiju mention this name before. It was the old man's first slave, a yellow ox. Jiju called out a few times in a row. Because he was too anxious, he walked in circles. Not long after, Xiao Xian heard the rumbling sound of hooves stomping on the ground, like rolling thunder. Looking in the direction of the sound, he saw at the end of the dirt road a huge yellow ox was running towards them, leaving a trail of dust behind it. Compared to the ox that Xiao Xian had seen before, it was much bigger. This kind of beast was not to be underestimated in the forest. As the big yellow ox approached, the ground shook even more. Its huge body and the two horns on its head were full of oppressive ferocity, as if it wanted to break through all obstacles in front of it. Moo! When the big yellow ox was in front of Jiju, it slowed down and stopped beside him. However, its eyes glanced at Xiao Xian a few times, as if it was sizing up Xiao Xian, a stranger. "What are you doing? You only came after I called you a few times." Jiju scolded. The big yellow ox lowered its head and gently nudged Jiju with its nose. It looked like it was acting coquettishly, but soon, the big yellow ox seemed to have noticed something. Its nose sniffed Jiju and turned to look at Xiao Xian. Its eyes, which were bigger than a pot, scanned Xiao Xian again like a scanner. This time, it looked more carefully. Then, Xiao Xian noticed that its gaze stopped on the animal skin bag he was carrying. However, it probably sensed that Xiao Xian was not easy to deal with and was also a stranger. Therefore, although it wanted to snatch Xiao Xian's animal skin bag, the big yellow ox did not act. However, the big yellow ox's gaze landed on Jiju again. Its nose sniffed again and then stared at Jiju's hand. "Moo, what are you moaning for? I can't let you eat this," Jiju said as he easily jumped onto the bull's back that was taller than a two-story building. "Come on up." Jiju patted the bull's back, gesturing for Xiao Xian to come up as well. The big yellow ox snorted through its huge nostrils and stomped its hooves. It was somewhat reluctant. Xiao Xian didn't hesitate and jumped up. "Let's go see the 1,000-grain gold." Jiju patted his horn. "Moo!" The big yellow ox let out a long roar. It stomped its hooves and turned around to run faster. Although it was fast, it was much steadier than when it came up. This was to take care of Jiju, who was on the back of the cow. Jiju said that Huang Tudi was another steward here. It helped to take care of several plots of land. Of course, there were also others who cooperated with it. In the golden grain fields, this big yellow ox didn't give face to anyone other than Jiju. Even the steward that Xiao Xian had met before couldn't make the ox move its hooves. The 1,000-grain gold wasn't planted in this area. On the back of the cow, Jiju said, "Every time a new strange grain is found, it will be planted in another place because there are too many variables." Jiju looked at Xiao Xian. "Take the 1,000-grain gold for example. You've planted it before, so you should know that when you plant it, the other crops around it can't grow normally." Xiao Xian nodded in agreement. "Indeed, when it first sprouted, I found a lot of weeds in the yard. But as it grew, it disappeared." Xiao Xian didn't say anything. Once he did, Jiju's heart ached. It was such a precious 1,000-grain gold, and this kid had casually scattered it in the backyard. Fortunately, the 1,000-grain gold had strong vitality and could adapt. Otherwise, it would have been a waste. But the 1,000-grain gold that this kid scattered in the backyard and didn't care much about had survived. It had even broken through one disaster after another. Not only that, when the seedlings of this master called golden grain had only grown a little, this kid's seedlings had already matured. He couldn't stay calm. Jiju wanted to say more, but he kept it in his heart. He didn't want to speak now. Stuffy. The big yellow ox ran through the planned fields. All kinds of crops quickly passed by. Fortunately, Xiao Xian had good eyesight and could see what kinds of crops were planted. Unfortunately, he couldn't recognize most of them. The golden grain fields didn't only grow golden grains. There were also a variety of food crops and herbs. The fields were huge and included several mountains. Some crops and herbs that liked mountainous environments were planted there. When they passed by a mountain, Xiao Xian could see slaves working on the mountain. When there were no other crops in the surrounding fields and only rows of well-equipped guards, Xiao Xian knew that they had arrived. If it were anyone else, they would have been targeted by these guards before they even got close. But when they saw the big yellow ox, the guards quickly opened a path for the ox to pass. There was no need for other tokens or passes. This big yellow ox was the best proof of identity. The big yellow ox stopped beside a wide dirt road. Ji Ju and Xiao Xian jumped off the ox's back. This is where the 1,000-grain gold is planted, Ji Ju said, pointing to a few large fields. Last year, there were many grains here. But when the 1,000-grain gold sprouted, all the crops in the surrounding fields died. Xiao Xian looked around. In the few fields he could see, there were only a few sparse yellow grasses growing in them. They swayed in the wind, desolate. This was indeed the result of the 1,000-grain gold. In the Yanjiao tribe, Xiao Xian only had about 20,000 grain gold in his backyard. But the plants in the surrounding areas were growing poorly. Fortunately, it was far away from the tribe and didn't affect the land much. But here, Ji Ju had planted a lot. The effect was obvious. There was a tall wooden fence around the area. There was a door just big enough for the big yellow ox to enter. Beside the door, there were guards inside and outside. When they saw Ji Ju, they bowed. "Let's go." Ji Ju called for Xiao Xian and walked in. Ji Ju had people surround the tall wooden poles after planting the 1,000-grain gold. Without Ji Ju's permission, no one outside could see what was going on inside. Even the stewards could not enter without Ji Ju's permission. Hence, the situation with the 1,000-grain gold was kept under wraps. That was why the younger generation of the Ji family was so anxious to find out what was going on. The fields with the 1,000-grain gold came into view. They were all planted in the same shape as the ones in the Yanjiao tribe. Now, the height of the plants reached Xiao Xian's waist. They've already passed the first tribulation. Those that don't will become fertilizer for other plants. When the next tribulation comes, another batch will be eliminated. After the third tribulation, the ones that survive are the best, Ji Ju said as he looked at the green fields. Ji Ju's eyes were filled with pride and relief. However, when he thought about what Xiao Xian had taken out, he slapped down his pride. Taking out the few grains Xiao Xian had given him, Ji Ju waved at Xiao Xian. Not far away, there was a small hall called Chiju Hall. This was the highest level place in the field. When they sat down, Ji Ju began to ask Xiao Xian about what happened when he planted the 1,000-grain gold. As descendants of the Ji family, they had too many secret techniques that were unknown to outsiders. That was why they were able to grow better crops than others. They were able to grow rare crops that others couldn't, especially grains. Someone once said that if you found a new type of grain that was difficult to grow, you just had to find the Ji family and they could grow it. But now, the situation was a little strange. They were seen as boorish and violent by the people, but they actually managed to grow such a rare breed, and it was even better than the Ji family's golden grain. How could these people who enjoyed the praises of the Ji family accept this? However, Ji Ju's main focus was on grains. Everything else was secondary. That was why he could adjust his mindset at this time. Xiao Xian did not hide anything and told Ji Ju what had happened. First, he wanted to understand the reason behind the change. The Ji family knew more about this than anyone else. Since Xiao Xian had told him how to grow it, Ji Ju would definitely help him find the reason. Second, based on Xiao Xian's understanding of Ji Ju, he would not go back on his word. Once he found out the reason from Xiao Xian, he would definitely reward Xiao Xian even more. "Fearsome beast meat?" Ji Ju exclaimed. The big yellow ox not far away flicked its ears. "Yes, they ate it," Xiao Xian said. So, it was because they ate vicious beast meat that they passed the 3 trials and ended up like this? Ji Ju placed the few grains he had been holding onto the table, still unable to wrap his head around it. Although I know of some rare methods such as bone burial, this is the first time I've heard of using fearsome beasts to feed them. Ji Ju stroked his beard, still in a daze. Could the secret ancestral recipe not be as good as a few pieces of fearsome beast meat? It shouldn't be. That's why I came this time to find out the reason. I also wanted to see what color the 1,000-grain gold you grew was, and if it was the same as ours, Xiao Xian said. Jiju's face reddened but he did not say anything. Xiao Xian continued, tell me, you're using a method passed down from your ancestors. You're using your own fertilizer. Will the result be a different color? For example, white, green, black and so on. Different fertilizers could produce different colors, right? Jiju stopped stroking his beard as he suddenly thought of something. His whole body shook, and the few strands of beard fell to the ground. I got it. I see. Ha ha ha. The 5 colors of gold, so that's what it means, ha 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 ha. Looking at the laughing Jiju, Xiao Xian had a toothache. This old man had gone crazy again, who knew what he was thinking. After laughing, Jiju ignored Xiao Xian and rushed into a room, leaving Xiao Xian and the bull outside the hall staring at each other. Seeing the bull staring at the grains on the table, Xiao Xian threw one of the grains that Jiju had peeled. It was a gift to Jiju for inspection, and he would not take it back. When Jiju came out again, he saw the bull blocking the entrance with its head. It stared at Xiao Xian and mooed. Xiao Xian, who had been sitting there, was taking a nap. Chapter 437. Xiao Xian was sleeping so soundly that he was drooling. His ears had a filtering function and he pretended not to hear anything he did not want to hear. However, as soon as Jiju came out, Xiao Xian woke up. In the past, people who came to Jiju's place were either too cautious and did not know where to put their hands, or greedy people who looked around and wanted to grab everything they saw. People like Xiao Xian who waited until they could fall asleep were too rare. After figuring out a question that had been bothering him for years, seeing Xiao Xian like this, Jiju was in a rare good mood. He smiled and asked, "What did you dream of?" "I was cooking porridge when you came." Xiao Xian wiped the drool from the corner of his mouth, not embarrassed at all. It was indeed very quiet and peaceful here. There was a faint fragrance of plants in the surroundings and it was very relaxing. In his dream, he had cooked a pot of porridge and the porridge was filled with white rice. That's not right. Xiao Xian paused in his stretching. White porridge. White rice. Thinking carefully, in the pot of porridge in his dream, every grain of rice was round. Although they were not as big as the purple grains in the tribe, they were not much smaller. Jiju sat down and poured himself a glass of water. Seeing Xiao Xian standing there in a daze, he asked, "What did you think of?" "I was thinking carefully about the pot of porridge in my dream," Xiao Xian said. Jiju was happy and did not think much of it. He just thought that Xiao Xian was greedy. Indeed, in a place full of food like this, it was not strange to dream of such things. Without thinking much, Jiju said, "Because of what you said, I thought of a problem that has been bothering me for a long time. The 1,000-grain gold was mentioned in the records left behind by our Ji family's ancestors. I know how to plant the 1,000-grain gold from our ancestors' notes." In order to find this, he had flipped through the records left behind by the Ji family's ancestors. He had found many things. However, it wasn't called 1,000-grain gold back then. It was called Golden Valley, which had a very broad meaning. Jiju had spent a lot of effort to find out more about the planting method of 1,000-grain gold. After some modification, he had replaced some of the outdated ingredients in the recipe. Finally, he had finalized the recipe for fertilizer. However, his ancestors' notes did mention the 5 colors of gold. Unfortunately, the notes were not complete and Jiju did not see the complete version. He did not understand the 5 colors of gold until Xiao Xian mentioned it. Only then did Jiju remember his ancestors' notes. The gold in the 1,000-grain gold does not refer to the same color. Jiju explained to Xiao Xian. The 5 colors of gold are different depending on the place and the person. Therefore, different places, different people and different methods will produce different results. Just like how Yanjiao's gold is purple, our field's gold might not be the same color as yours. It might even be different from the original grains. Different depending on the place and the person. If that's the reason, then there should be differences between different colors, right? Xiao Xian asked. That's right. Ji Ju stroked his beard and suddenly felt that something was wrong with it. It felt like there was less of it. He paused, then said, the 5 colors of the 1,000-grain gold will indeed be different. Based on my speculation, the 1,000-grain gold planted in your tribe will change greatly compared to the ones we found in the mountains. This is the trend of their change. As long as it's planted in your tribe, by your people, and by the same method, the final product will be more suitable for your tribe. However, if one day your tribe moves away and leaves the 1,000-grain gold there, a few of them will survive for hundreds or thousands of years. However, generation after generation, they will gradually decrease and change back to their original appearance until they become like this. Ji Ju opened his hand, holding a few bean-sized grains with a dark golden luster. These were their first harvest. Thank you for the information. Xiao Xian said solemnly. Take good care of your tribe's purple gold grains. Even if you don't know how useful it is now, one day it will prove its worth. Everything in the world complements each other. Any change has its own reason. Even though there are 5 colors, the purple one might be what your tribe needs the most. Similarly, the one in my field will be what I need the most. Ji Ju sighed. It was impossible to say that he was not envious of Xiao Xian, but now Ji Ju was much calmer. Perhaps what he needed the most was not the ones the Yanjiao people grew, but the ones growing slowly in his field. As for Xiao Xian's Yanjiao tribe, those who could grow the 1,000-grain gold and make it change like this were definitely not a group of rough and fierce people like the rumor said. He also had a new understanding of the Yanjiao people. Ji Ju was about to talk about Xiao Xian's purple 1,000-grain gold grains when he noticed that there was only one left on the table. Ji Ju remembered that he had brought 3 over. One was shelled and the other 2 were intact. Now there was only one unshelled grain left on the table. Where were the other 2? Xiao Xian saw Ji Ju look over and pointed outside the door. The ox head blocking the door immediately retreated. Since he had fed the ox head, Ji Ju did not say much. He only huffed and thought of the 1,000-grain gold in his field. He could not help but smile. Xiao Xian, what color do you think the grains in my field will be? White. Xiao Xian blurted out. Then he realized that he had brought in the pot of porridge from his dream. Ji Ju was puzzled. Why are you so sure? I guessed, Xiao Xian said dryly. Ji Ju looked meaningfully at Xiao Xian. He did not say whether he believed him or not. His fingers tapped on the table. After a while, he said, the grains in my field are about to reach the second tribulation. How long will you stay in the royal city? Why not stay for a while and see how they go through the tribulation? Xiao Xian calculated the time and nodded. I have to discuss this with another elder. Then he smiled. You're willing to let me watch? Aren't you afraid that I'll learn all the secret techniques? Ji Ju waved his hand. No. The most important part of this process was the fertilizer. He had prepared the fertilizer himself before sending it out. How could he let others know? After Xiao Xian returned to the Qingmang Palace, Ji Ju treated them to a meal. After the meal, Xiao Xian left the field with Guang Yi and Black Bear. However, they left through a side door. There were too many people blocking the entrance. It would be troublesome to leave through there. They would not be able to go back. In the future, if there are too many people at the entrance, enter through this side door. This is the closest door to the strange house hall, said Ji Ju. The guards at the side door were also instructed to remember Xiao Xian's face. Next time, they would bring him directly to the strange house hall. Ji Ju also arranged for an ox cart to pull 10 big bags of grains. He brought Xiao Xian and the other 2 away. The field was too big and there were too many side doors. There was no one outside this side door, so Xiao Xian and the others could pass through easily. Black Bear was so happy he could not sit still. 10 bags of grains. Although they were all for Xiao Xian, they could at least give him 1 or 2 of them, right? The price was negotiable. On the way, Xiao Xian discussed with Guang Yi. If Guang Yi did not want to stay in the royal city for too long, he could go back in a few days. The Black Bears would send a team from the royal city to Amba City to bring back some grains. However, Guang Yi refused. He did not feel safe leaving Xiao Xian alone here. Duo Kong also said that his mission was to protect Xiao Xian. He could not let the tribe's elder be bullied in the royal city. Knowing that Xiao Xian and Guang Yi would be staying in the royal city for a while, Black Bear took the initiative to arrange for Xiao Xian and Guang Yi to stay at their station. He did not want to let go of Xiao Xian. Ji Ju did not say that they would not be allowed to enter the next time. When they returned to the royal city and entered the station, Black Bear had people arrange a new courtyard for Xiao Xian and Guang Yi. This would make it easier for Xiao Xian and the others to store their things. Xiao Xian, when do you plan to go to the golden grain fields again? Asked Black Bear. The day after tomorrow. I want to look around the city tomorrow. I also want to buy some things, said Xiao Xian. Black Bear had arranged a courtyard, but he did not want to use everything they gave him. He had to prepare some of his own things. That's fine too. I'll let Mauda accompany you to buy some things tomorrow. After all, as the boss of a trading team and the leader of a tribe, Black Bear had a lot on his hands. He had been out the whole day and had left many things unsettled. There were 1 or 2 things that he did not trust others to handle. The day after tomorrow, Xiao Xian would be going to Ji Ju's place again. That was why he had to arrange things tomorrow and go to the golden grain fields. It's decided then. What gift should he prepare for his visit to the grange the day after tomorrow? Black Bear thought. Mauda brought Xiao Xian and Guang Yi to the new courtyard. What do you want to buy tomorrow? I'm familiar with the royal city, I know where the best things are. He had heard about what happened today from Black Bear. He looked at Xiao Xian like he was looking at the golden leaves of the royal city. He would not give up on this opportunity to make a good impression. Who knows, he might be able to go to the golden grain fields next time. He was excited just thinking about it. We'll see. But if I have time, I want to visit a friend. I just don't know where they live, said Xiao Xian. Black Bear, who was thinking about what to give the day after tomorrow, perked up his ears. What's your friend's name? I'll ask around, said Mauda. The Gongjia family. Do you know where they live? Yes. Yes. Tomorrow, I'll... Wait. Before Mauda could finish, Black Bear cut him off. Black Bear took 2 huge strides to Xiao Xian. He was so agitated that blood rushed to his head. His bearded, tanned face was flushed. I suddenly feel like it's better if I bring you out. I know a few Gongjia people, said Black Bear. Mauda. I should be the one leading tomorrow. I'll do it. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.